You're listening to the Plain Talking UK podcast, the UK-based podcast written by a passenger for anyone. And here are your hosts, Carlos Stebbings, Matt Smith and Neville Bounds.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to episode 235 of the Plain Talking UK podcast. My name's Neville Bounds and it's going to be a slightly different show today because young Carlos is far too busy doing a disco, whatever one of those is, and doing some other bits and pieces.
Come on, it wasn't that long ago, Nev. You remember what a disco is.
But here's my chum, Matt Smith.
Hello everyone, welcome. Apologies for our slightly late start. There is a good reason behind that. I'll bore everyone with the details at some point during the show. Yes, I'll just do the continuity check. We are, as I say, slightly later than usual. It is 7:23 in the evening on Friday, September the 21st.
Oh, it's still Friday then. We've actually managed to avoid reaching midnight.
Yeah, for the moment, yes. Bearing in mind we've only just started, so I wouldn't hold your breath just yet, Al.
And from his estate in the northwest of England, we are joined by Captain Al and Josh, by the looks of things, as well.
Council estate.
Harsh.
Yes, very harsh. Yes, a very good evening. It's Captain Al here with my co-pilot, it would appear.
Way. I understand you've been making cookies, Josh. He's nodding. Right. Okay.
What sort of cookies have you made? What theme have they been?
Ghost theme.
Ghost themes. You're getting in preparation for Halloween,
oh,
yes?
Halloween, of course, yes. Yeah, very close by, very exciting. Oh, yes.
And also joining us today from his home, I think, is Pilot Pip.
Yes,
It's cardboard box, to be honest, isn't it, really?
Shut up. Yes, at home, just got home a couple of hours ago from 6 days at work.
Do they actually know that you're in that show house on the estate?
Josh, give your dad a slap from me.
No.
Thank you.
He actually did. Nice.
Good lad.
Very good. Okay, Nev, I've got
nice to be here.
I got a slight feeling, Nev, we're not going to have much control over today's proceedings. I don't know what gave me that idea.
I just can't think why that might be. But
indeed.
Anyway, so what's everybody been up to this week? What have you been up to, Matt?
Me? Oh, I've just been driving buses, really. That's about all I've been doing. Buses? Coaches. Oops. Get me into trouble. Yes, I've been driving coaches today, this week, and then I had to go to Ipswich today, so...
Is that a long journey?
It's longer than you think, believe it or not.
So it's about 6 or 7 miles and about three or 4 hours on those roads in your part of the world, yeah?
Not quite that bad, no, but it's about an hour, I think, something like that. But
and how was the weather?
The weather was changeable. Changeable, very windy. It's large, tall vehicles, and the Orwell Bridge are not the way forward. Let's put it that way. I was quite glad.
Are you technically classed as a high-sided vehicle?
We are indeed. So actually, if they do close the Orwell Bridge, we're not allowed over it. If they say close to high-siders, then unfortunately that does include us. However,
until you topple over on your side, and then you're okay. You can continue
absolutely.
the journey.
You just sort of skirt away along. It's downhill over the bridge. It's fine. Anyway, this has got nothing to do with aviation.
No. And Al, have you been flying this week?
Well, yes, actually. I popped down to Redhill, which was very near Gatwick. So I went down the day before yesterday, spent the night down there, and then came back yesterday. I managed to fit in a very quick lunch with Captain Nick from the APG crew. And he was very generous, actually. He bought my lunch. So thanks very much for that, Nick. Gosh. I am much appreciative.
Very nice indeed. And what about you, Pip? You've been busy this week too?
Yes, very busy. Like I just said, 6 days at work. It's meant to be getting into our low season, but there doesn't seem to be any sign of that happening. It's been very busy, non-stop, 4 legs most days. All systems go at work.
Nice. Well, sorry, go on.
No, I was just about to say, I've only got 4 days off as well, instead of my usual 5 or 6, and then I'm back off to the States on Wednesday morning.
Oh.
But you managed to make a destination this week, if I remember rightly. And
yes, very exciting.
I'm not allowed to say this, but yeah, I'm guessing that it's okay. So you fulfilled a bit of a sort of lifetime ambition,
sort
have
of
you
bucket
not?
list type thing.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't go that far, but yes, I finally got to go to the Rock, otherwise known as Gibraltar.
Ah, okay.
After all these years, yes. Al and I have spoken about Gibraltar for ages, and I just never seem to go there. It always comes up on my schedule, but then something always happens and the schedule changes and I go somewhere else. So when it came up again this week, I was understandably a bit skeptical and thought, nah, not going to get to go there. But lo and behold, everything came together and we flew down from Glasgow, of all places, to Gibraltar.
So now this is one of those things I ask the question because it's like with anything, like, you know, when it's on the bucket list or it's somewhere you really want to go. I mean, did it disappoint? They say never meet your heroes and that kind of thing, don't they? Did it disappoint?
Funny you should mention that. In a way, because the context in which Al and I have always talked about it is from a sort of a challenging airport point of view, and Al has always bigged it up. You know, it was always sort of
Right.
talked it up as a real macho place to go because it's so difficult and only real pilots can fly there.
Oh, good.
So actually, when we did go there earlier in the week, and there was not a breath of wind,
Oh.
it was a perfectly calm day, no hassles whatsoever. One of the easiest
landings you've ever
landings
done.
I've ever made. So
Okay,
it's
right,
an
yeah.
airport for wimps, actually.
Okay, right. Okay.
But on the other hand, it was a lovely place to go. Just to, I don't know if you guys have been there. Obviously, Nev and Al, I know you have. But it's a lovely place to just go and look at the rock there and
So
just take it all in. It's beautiful.
Al, I'm just
you
going to ask the question here. Obviously, you talk about it as one of those places that can be difficult to fly in. I mean, what is it? Is it wind factors and things like that? I mean, what is it that makes it so challenging under usual?
It's a combination of factors. It's a relatively short runway with water at both ends. There are wind issues. The rock itself has its own microclimate, so you can have thick fog at one end of the runway and it be perfectly clear at the other. And then there are the political issues. The airport sits incredibly close to the border with Spain, so manoeuvring requires you to stay in Gibraltar airspace. And of course, the jurisdiction of Gibraltar has been disputed by the Spanish for as long as we've been there, so they like to play some games from time to time. So it's a combination of factors.
Okay.
As Pip's found out, you go there on a nice day and it's not challenging at all. Okay. And that is, to be honest, the case for probably at least 75% of the time.
Right.
But the other 25% of the time it can be very challenging.
The only surprise and the only challenge was the contaminated runway. You know, when we go into all our data, we have performance figures for a wet runway, for a snow-covered runway and slush and all this kind of thing. But I wasn't prepared for the thick layer of bird poo all over the runway. That was a bit of a shock.
Bit
I've never
slippery.
seen a runway in an apron so covered in bird crap. Unbelievable. I don't know what sort of birds they've got there.
And
Very big
oil
seagulls.
oil from the cars and vans
Yeah,
going
outrageous.
across the runway as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Like I say, made for very slippery conditions. Anyway, we probably should get things underway. What do you reckon, Nev?
Yes, I've just a very quick one on that. I'm off to Gibraltar 1st November to go and have a chat with the boys in the tower there, which is very nice.
okay.
So I'll be doing an article and some video on that later in the year. But just at the start of this week, I went on what I think is going to be my final ever Boeing 767 flight from British Airways.
Oh, yeah, cool.
I went to Amsterdam and back just for the day, but I went out on a 767 looking forward to coming back on one as well. I thought, I'll just have a word with the crew because it'll be their last sector, quick chat, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, they replaced it with an A321. So,
Okay. Did it go tech by any chance?
probably, yes.
Was it still in Amsterdam from the morning?
It might have been. It probably never made it out, yeah.
Yeah. It was still there.
It limped into Amsterdam after the whole 40 minutes that it stressed itself in the air.
It's quite a distance, isn't it, for that long-range aircraft? Anyway, so that was it. Right, so I think we should have a look at the civil aviation. What do you think, guys?
Yeah. Let's do it. Here we go.
Okay. Well, the first story is on the Daily Mail website, which is where we get all our aviation information from, as you know. And poor old BA have had another bit of a mess with the IT thing
actually,
again.
this is hot off the presses, isn't it? Because it was literally 4 o'clock today it was published, wasn't it? So
yes,
it's very
it was.
hot off the presses.
And, well, BA passengers have been delayed again after apparent computer failure hit the airline's Heathrow Terminal 5. Customers complained of queues at the London airport and difficulties checking in after what the company called a technical issue with some of our internal systems. Broadcaster Andrew Neil was among those caught up in the problems. Why that's relevant, I don't know. He tweeted, yet another computer failure at Terminal 5 Heathrow for British Airways. Now regular occurrence, flight delayed, usual shambles, not yet on huge scale. The plane is ready to take off, but we're stuck waiting in the terminal because the computer system for boarding is down and there's no backup system. Seb Riley wrote, I think somebody at your organisation should press Control-Alt-Delete and start again. And there's further comments. You have a new problem or excuse every day. You're losing loyal customers across the board, and your once prestigious brand is now in the gutter. Shameful. Despite the slew of comments and complaints, a company spokesman insisted to Mail Online that there was not a computer failure at Terminal 5. She said a temporary glitch with some of our internal systems has been resolved, and our customers have continued to check in and fly to their destinations as normal. Earlier, the airline posted a tweet saying, we are working to resolve a technical issue with some of our internal systems, including our call centres. Flights are continuing to operate and customers are able to check in as normal. And they tweeted to another customer. It's not very helpful because the page is just frozen, but you get the idea. They've gone through another phase of this again, and it's a bit unfortunate for them because they do tend to come sort of one after the other, and it just makes for a bit of a big problem because obviously most BA flights depart from Terminal 5 and arrive there as well. There's a few from Terminal 3 these days, but so what do you think, Al?
Well, it begs the question, when is a glitch not a fault?
Right, yes.
It wasn't a fault, it was a glitch.
Right.
Okay. I'm not going to get the dictionary out, but I'd say that they were one and the same.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I can see where you go with that. Yeah, it's just...
I came through Terminal 5 just a few hours ago, actually, and everything seemed to be running pretty smoothly, so no sign of any chaos. I think BA's problem, as has been pointed out numerous times this last few months with all the glitches that they've had, is that in their efforts to cut costs and be competitive, they've outsourced a lot of their IT provisions to, I don't know, companies in places in the world where perhaps you wouldn't want to outsource them to. And there seems to be failing on all sorts of levels. We had the credit card thing the other week, and this.
That's going to cost them a lot of money, that credit card thing.
Yeah, maybe so. In fact, funny enough, I was just catching up on some PT UK as I drove home this afternoon, and you were saying, oh, well, maybe it's this third party who are responsible for the credit card thing, and they're gonna fit the bill. But I doubt it. Ultimately, it's BA who are responsible for this. It's it's their customers.
Yeah, I mean,
they've got a responsibility to be, if they're outsourcing, fair enough, but they've got a responsibility to be outsourcing it to the right people.
What we were saying, Pip, is, I mean, the buck will essentially stop with BA, but, BA are going to be countersuing these people who basically didn't handle the card payments correctly. That's what it sort of boiled down to. But I think it's safe to say that I don't know what it is, but BA do seem to be having a lot of IT related issues, shall we say, and we don't seem to be experiencing those same hiccups with a lot of the other airlines. I mean,
because they keep all their IT in house, I think.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I do have to say, considering that I'm flying BA on Wednesday morning to Chicago, and I'm hoping to get an upgrade. I love BA; they're the best airline ever. So if anyone from BA is watching, please can I have an upgrade on Wednesday?
Right.
Please don't make me sit in row 50 on the 747, please. For 9 hours.
What's so bad about
that row?
No, I don't like that row.
That's one of your favourite rows.
Anything further back than about row 4 is not my favourite row.
Right, okay. Anything that's not in business class, you're not a fan.
Yeah.
I assume. Okay, all right. Well,
unfortunately, my cheapskate company won't pay for business class travel when we're going for training duty.
Okay, all right. Well, before you end up in trouble with someone, we're going to move on to the next story. This is story 2. It's a Ryanair story, as always. It's on the BBC News website, bbc.co.uk, and the headline is Italy opens probe into Ryanair hand luggage charges. Now, I must admit, I was quite surprised that somebody hasn't done this before, if I'm honest, because, I mean, every week we seem to be reading a story out where the rules have changed yet again. So Italy's
opened his fair share of probes.
Oh, no. Italy's competition watchdog has opened an inquiry into Ryanair's decision to add new hand luggage charges. From November, Italian passengers wishing to take 2 bags on board will pay €6, that's £5, for priority boarding. Those that do not will only be able to take on 1 bag that fits under the seat in front, with the second bag checked in at a cost of €8. Is it Antitrust said that the hand luggage was an essential element of transport and should be included in the ticket price. Some travellers only carry their 10 kilogram or £22 standard wheelie bag. Ryanair spokesman Kenny Jacobs, we do love a statement from Kenny Jacobs, says, "We look forward to cooperating with this Italian inquiry. All Ryanair customers are free to bring 1 piece of carry-on on board, but no airline customer has a right to unlimited carry-on bags. UK rules applied by Ryanair allow passengers to take 2 pieces of hand luggage into the aircraft if they have paid £5 for priority boarding. If they have not paid that charge, the second bag is put in the hold, albeit without being charged as checked luggage." Antitrust said that Ryanair's new Italian policy could amount to unfair commercial practice in that it distorts the final price of the ticket and does not allow a true comparison with other airline prices. Italian consumer associations had complained to Antitrust about Ryanair's decision. If its unfair commercial practice on hand luggage is confirmed, Ryanair should reimburse all its customers who suffer unfair additional costs. I won't go on. I mean, you basically get the gist of it. But I mean, what are we thinking about this? I mean, part of me is thinking, frankly, as long as as long as they're being upfront at the start about that, it's going to cost you €8 or whatever to put your bag. Does it? I mean, they're still cheap flights.
The problem is that no one has a solution for this problem with hand baggage.
Yeah.
Because in many respects, the airlines don't really want to put bags in the hold because then they have to pay people to load them and unload them. And the passengers want to take as much luggage as they possibly can with them for free. So we just have, this balance. Until we start having the regulators allow roof racks on the top of aircraft, then we're always going to struggle to find room to put bags in the cabin. And the manufacturers have produced bigger and bigger hat bins for bags, but ultimately we just don't have the space. And, with the advent of the low-cost airlines where, it's all one class and we've got as many bums on seats as you can possibly fit in that space, everyone generally brings a bag. So the airlines just keep going round and round in circles. I don't know how many times Ryanair have changed their bag policy.
Quite a few in the last few weeks, it has to be said.
Yes. So, it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, really, in causing widespread confusion amongst their customers.
Yeah.
Because depending on when you booked your ticket determines what the policy was at the time, and then obviously they've changed the policy and then have said, well, depending on when you booked your ticket, some people will be able to carry on board what they thought they were going to be able to, and others not. And undoubtedly there will be another change in a few months. So where do we go from here? It's just chaos, absolute chaos, and I feel sorry for the public.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm not helped by the fact that, of course, they keep when they've been changing the policy. Sometimes they're saying it's like with immediate effect. So those who've already booked their ticket are still going to be subject to these alterations, but they may not necessarily know about it, and they say that they've sent somebody an email, but let's be honest, half of your Ryanair emails end up in the junk bin anyway. So it's just sort of, as you say, it's the public who are going to suffer, essentially.
Well, it's up to the public to vote with their feet, but there's obviously no sign of that happening. So,
but what's the alternative?
As long as people are willing to pay the...
Yeah, one of the difficulties for the public, and I'm seeing the other side of the story here, is that a lot of the low-cost carriers operate routes that no one else would undertake. So voting with your feet, yes, if you're flying, London to Amsterdam, you've got plenty of choice. But if you're flying from the back end of nowhere to the backside of nowhere, and there's only one airline that does that route, then you're kind of stuck, really.
Yeah.
So I know what you mean, Pip, and unfortunately, it will never change because there is this, almost perverse sense that the customer's not right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to push this sort of like back to Nev. Actually, let's look at this from the other way. I mean, the Ryanair thing seems very, they are, even if you were having to pay the €8 or whatever to have the stuff put in the hold, it does seem still very cheap to say a standard BA ticket to the same place.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing we do lose sight of, and I'm not really a supporter of this argument,
no,
but we have to say it. Let's be honest. Ryanair and Easyjet and other low-cost carriers have enabled travel for families that just would not have been possible previously. Yeah. I go back to, in my professional life, exhibitions that I used to do in Geneva back in 1998 or whatever it was, and it was British Airways or Swiss Air, and that was it. And that was those are your only two options. They chose what the fare was going to be between them, and it wouldn't matter how expensive it was. You would have to pay it. Now there's a lot more choice, and I think especially if you're taking families with you, those low-cost carriers obviously do provide a good service. Where it goes slightly wrong is where we have all these constant rule changes. And I say my friend of mine in Sweden, she considered herself an expert on exactly what she could and couldn't take on Ryanair at any stage because she's a regular commuter to and from Sweden. But even she's going, Nev, I can't even keep up with this anymore. They're just making it too difficult. So on the basis that it's still a pretty cheap way to get around, you are going to have these challenges, I think, definitely.
Do you think that Ryanair changed their policy deliberately to confuse, or do you think that they're just trying to react to the changing market?
I'm 50-50 on that. I wouldn't like to say one way or the other, but I do smell a little bit of a rat, shall we say? Yeah.
It's one of those sort of situations where you look at this and you think, right, okay, well, I want to go on this flight and I need to take a handbag with me and I need to do this and that. And then, your bag ends up in the hold because you haven't paid the €8. And you might have things that you have in that bag that you weren't intending to go into the hold because they may be fragile. Or indeed, the bag that you brought was, of a nature where, it's soft-sided or whatever. And then you're completely and utterly in the vagaries of the handling companies and how they treat your luggage.
Yeah. Yes, and of course, there is a small issue with that, as you were just saying to me in a message just now, Al.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that quite a few of the listeners or viewers have seen a video that's been circulating over the last sort of 36 hours of a baggage handler working at Manchester Airport, and it happens to be a Ryanair flight. And I think it's probably fair to say that there's not much due diligence on his part in the way he's handling the bags.
Indeed, I'm just playing that video now. As you mention it here, it's safe to say they're basically going onto the trolley. For those of you listening online, the video is listening on the audio version. They're going onto the trolley and then they're immediately falling straight out the other side. He really couldn't give a monkeys, could he?
There's a plus side to this, though, in that considering that the most of the baggage has the aerodynamics of a brick, it's got some good speed out of it. Actually,
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
there's flying through the air.
There's some good.
But you imagine as a passenger that's your bag that's ended up in the hold, which you'd never planned for it to go into the hold because you've been caught out by the policy changes or you've not paid the €8.
Yeah.
And there's, Aunt Nellie's ashes are, just in a horrible mess inside your suitcase now.
Oh dear, yeah, that is true. Well, and I go back to when I was again flying Ryanair, and I had one of my best friends. His wedding video was on my hard drive, and I'm coming back from Edinburgh, and it's like, no, I'm afraid your bag is going to have to go in the hold. And I did get my own way actually, but I did kick up a real fuss saying no, because I don't trust you not to. As I say, it's nothing to do with you specifically, but I need this bag to be well cared for because of its contents. I mean, I got lucky and they took pity on me, but you know, as you say, this video that we're referring to here, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? This is why people want to take their bags on board, and I suppose this is why they'll always get away with it. Is people would rather pay the extra €8, I think it was, to sort of take to pay priority boarding and essentially bring the bag with you. I think that's why people are why they're getting away with it. So they're getting an extra €8 for every flight.
Neil in the chat room sums it up nicely. He says the way to get around this is to pay for priority boarding. Otherwise, by the time you join the back of the queue, the rules have changed by the time you get to the front.
Nice, Neil.
Yes, very good, Neil. Very good. Of course, there is another issue with that, though. Actually, again, one of the stories that we followed last week, either last week or the week before, is that there is a limit to the amount of people who can have priority boarding.
Indeed.
So it's a real minefield, isn't it? It's well, as I say, at the end of the day, Ryanair can do whatever the heck they like, because if it weren't
they
for
will introduce a super priority boarding. It just goes on and on and on, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed. As I say, but I'm going to defend them a little bit here and say that if it wasn't for Ryanair, I wouldn't have had a couple of the most amazing experiences that I've had in the last sort of year or so. One of obviously which was my trip to Toulouse. That was with Ryanair, and then 3 days in Rome to go and meet the legend that was Sir Grant of McHerron. And if it hadn't have been for Ryanair,
Has he passed away?
No, he hasn't.
Oh, okay. Just the way you said he was. I mean,
no. Yeah, it's an ever movable beast. One minute he is a legend, and then anyway.
So he goes from legend to persona non grata to dead in a matter of a sentence.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for that hole that I'll never be able to dig myself out of. Thanks. So I say I'm gonna stick up for Ryanair here and say yes. Okay, they keep changing the rules. It is annoying, but if it wasn't for them, then two of the most amazing experiences that I've had in my life would not have taken place, because I would never have been able to afford to do said things with another carrier.
There you go. Excellent.
There you are.
Right, let's move on to the next story then. And I think we should give this one to Al. Actually, this could be quite an interesting merger if this happens.
Yes, this comes from the Telegraph business section. That's the telegraph.co.uk. And the headline is, Emirates said to seek Etihad takeover to create the world's largest airline.
Ooh.
Persian Gulf airline Emirates is looking at taking over unprofitable neighbour Etihad. People familiar with the matter said in a move that would create the world's biggest carrier by passenger traffic. The talks, which are at a preliminary stage, would see Dubai-based Emirates acquire the main airline business of Abu Dhabi's Etihad, which would keep its maintenance arm, according to the People. The negotiations could yet fall through, they said. Any deal would require the blessing of the rulers of the richest sheikdoms in the United Arab Emirates. For Abu Dhabi, which sits on 6% of global oil reserves, it would advance a drive to overhaul state-controlled entities as it adapts to lower crude prices. The airlines have traditionally been arch rivals, with their hubs competing to attract the same transfer passengers making long-distance trips between Asia and the West. An Emirates spokeswoman said the company doesn't comment on speculation, as did a spokesman for Etihad. Were a transaction to go ahead, the enlarged airline operation would be bigger than that of the American Airlines Group, which has a market value of $19.2 billion. Emirates Chairman Sheikh Ahmed bin Saeed Al Maktoum and President Tim Clark have previously played down speculation that the carriers might combine, with Al Maktoum saying in May that there has never been merger talks. Mr. Clark said in June that the question was one for the shareholders, while adding that he saw nothing happening in the short to medium term. A combination of the airlines would provide further evidence of the sheikdom's consolidating business to boost competitiveness. Abu Dhabi and Dubai companies formed Emirates Global Aluminium, one of the world's largest producers, in a $15 billion combination in 2013. And the two have studied a merger of their stock exchanges. The state was also the driving force in compelling Emirates to cooperate with local discount carrier Fly Dubai. Etihad has been shrinking its operations following the failure of so-called equity alliance strategy that saw it invest in a number of generally ailing foreign operators to help more traffic through Abu Dhabi. One of those, Air Berlin, collapsed last year, while another, Italy's Alitalia, filed for bankruptcy protection, causing the pact to largely unravel. The Mideast company also saw its own business come under pressure as a slide in the price of oil led to a drop in travel in crude-based companies. That contributed to a 1.52 billion loss in 2017, taking the 2-year deficit of the airline unit to almost $3.5 billion US dollars.
Wow.
Fitch Ratings last month said that it expected Etihad to continue losing money through 2022. These numbers are just phenomenal, aren't they?
They are, aren't they? Yeah, absolutely. I should just say, actually, whilst the Al is reading that story, I should just say that another article that has come up, and for the sake of balance, and here for the second time in 2018, both Emirates and Etihad have both publicly denied rumours suggesting that the two are in merger talks. So I would just sort of address the balance there that was tweeted sort of shortly after that article was released. But you do wonder if there is something in this, though, when the rumours do keep popping up,
Yeah, well, the smoke there's fire, right?
Yeah, that's the thing.
I mean, what do we think? Do we think the merger of Etihad and Emirates would be a good thing?
Well, I just think that it's obviously they are two massive airlines in their own right with huge Middle Eastern hubs, and of course that's the advantage, isn't it? Especially for going to Australia and what have you, and with the longer range aircraft that are coming more and more now. I think it's that they are big carriers in their own right, but I just can't see the reason for an acquisition on either side, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think from the consumer's point of view, it would take away a lot of the competition, because the three main Middle Eastern carriers, Qatar, Etihad and Emirates, compete over a large chunk of the same routes.
Yeah.
It's just a case of whether you route via Dubai, Abu Dhabi or Doha. So, and geographically they're all very close. So a merger of the two of the three, yes, it would make it a huge airline. But I wonder whether it would cause prices to ultimately rise.
Well, yes, I mean, less competition can surely only mean bad news for the consumer, as you say. It's one to keep an eye on, I think, Nev.
Indeed. Well, is one for Pip, and it's all about a bit of a fail with Cathay Pacific.
A fail indeed, yeah. So this also comes from theguardian.com. Headline: Cathay Pacific spells its name wrong on the side of a plane. Wah, 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 wah.
Yes.
So have you got the pictures for this?
I have indeed, yeah. I'm bringing them up now,
You need to see this. So Cathay Pacific has given visitors to Hong Kong Airport a surprise by spelling its name wrong on the side of a plane. The Boeing 777 was emblazoned with the words, I'm not quite sure how we're going to say this, Cathay
Pacific.
Pacific, yes.
With so Paciic.
Very good.
Which,
yes.
As the more astute viewers will notice, is not how you spell Pacific. The company's social media team saw the funny side of the error, tweeting that the plane was being sent back to be repainted.
Mm-hmm.
The image has been posted on the Hong Kong Aviation discussion board, a Facebook group for plane spotters. While the airline insisted the spelling error was a mistake, yes, some had their doubts.
Yeah.
An engineer for Heiko, a maintenance company operating in the region, told the South China Morning Post, the spacing is too on point for a mishap. We have stencils. There should be a blank gap in letters, in between letters, if it was a real mistake.
Yeah,
well, I don't understand that. How can that not be anything other than?
I think what they're essentially
a mistake.
What they're getting at is they're suggesting that it may have possibly been an organised PR stunt.
Oh, I see. That didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
Well, what a weird Why would that be a good thing?
Well, because we're all sat here at it's just coming up to 8 o'clock on a Friday evening, and we're all sat here talking about it. So,
well, it doesn't make me want to go and buy a ticket on Cathay Pacific. In
No,
fact, probably
but-
the opposite, to be honest.
No, but to be fair, the name is now in your head. I mean, the thing is it made BBC News, it made the news at 10. Coverage here in the UK has been essentially, across the board here, and I don't know, the cynic
I'd
in
like
me
you
is...
to picture, if you will, the boardroom where all of the senior executives of Cathay Pacific are all
Okay.
sat around. And the aged CEO is absolutely livid
Right.
that this has taken place and is jumping up and down on his very, very expensive seat. And the other senior executives are all very twitchy. And there is a 14-year-old spotty kid sat at the other end of the table. He is the head of their social media team.
Okay, right.
And he gently puts his hand up and says, but sir, the volume of hits on our website have doubled overnight. And the slightly aged CEO sits down into his chair, scratches his chin and goes, very good, very good.
In a way, I hope you're right, because surely
Yeah.
there's no way on earth that no one could have noticed that before it
left,
tugged it out
but
of the hangar and put it back on the line.
Yeah. And that's why I think it is a PR stunt, if I'm honest with you.
But it's a
because
very odd PR stunt.
It
don't
is,
you think?
here we
Also,
are.
There's no
Whoever-
such thing as
whoever
bad
put-
publicity.
No, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
And I think that if you look at what the spelling that they've managed to achieve with this, they've obviously, I think they've realised that they've spelt it wrong. At the point where they should have put the correct letter in, but they just sort of carried on anyway,
Yeah.
as if it was no one was going to notice. But,
No, indeed.
yeah.
It's just
Well, I'll happily buy a ticket with Cathay Pacific, but Cathay Pacific I'm not too keen on, I must be honest.
right, okay, fair enough. Yeah, all right then.
That's an odd story, that one.
Yeah, well, as I
No,
say...
you see, I mean, what the way I'd run it now is that I would keep that airframe in that livery because it will become very special. It's
Yeah.
like these, and please excuse this little tangential journey through my mind for our non-UK listeners.
Brace
but
yourselves,
It's
everyone.
like these 50-pence coins that have got, little characters on them. That
Oh, yeah, like the Peter Rabbit and things.
50p to the Royal Mail, but people are selling them for hundreds of pounds
Yeah.
because they're special and they're rare. Well, this aircraft would be very rare and would have lots of people go to see it. So, I'm a little bit disappointed that it's going to go back in to be repainted.
Yeah. Are you thinking they're going to charge extra for special seats on said aeroplane?
Given the particular spelling error there, I guess,
Yeah.
in their maintenance department that day, no one particularly gave an F.
Bum,
Oh,
bum.
wow.
That's a good
done.
joke. That
That's
one. You
good.
need to
Yeah, no,
think
you can
about
have
that.
that
That's a
one.
good joke, I
All right.
promise.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, it comes
almost...
straight out of Twitter. Well done, Kurt. Retweet.
Okay, Nev, please dig us out of this hole.
Well, our Air Malta correspondent is missing today,
He
but
is.
that does not stop us covering an Air Malta story, and this is on the Aviation Herald website, and it says that an Air Malta Airbus A319-100, registration 9 Hotel AEJ, performing KM 100 from Malta to London Heathrow, was accelerating for takeoff from Malta's runway 31 when the aircraft encountered a flock of birds, causing multiple impacts, prompting the crew to reject takeoff at a high speed at about 100 knots over the ground. The aircraft slowed safely, stopped about 2,100 meters down the runway for an inspection by emergency services, then taxied to the apron about 8 minutes after the rejected takeoff. The aircraft was examined and cleaned, then departed again after about 4 hours on the ground and reached London with a delay of about 3.5 hours. The local newspaper, Malta Today, used a file photo of an Air Malta aircraft having encountered multiple bird strikes that looks like as if the aircraft was suffering from measles. The file photo currently circulates the internet as photo of this current bird strike. So, media fail again there. But now, what do you think about stopping? Let's say it was 100 knots, Al. That's just into the high speed regime,
Yes.
I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, I know that this is a file photo, but if we assume that the actual incident aircraft hit as many birds as the file photo. So, I mean, the statement says it was a flock of birds. Yes, you are probably going to stop, because what you don't want is a bird impaled on your probe.
Oh, I beg to differ.
Especially if you've got two.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Al, being serious for a minute, and before Matt's head explodes.
Yeah.
On a typically laden A319, I'm guessing 100 knots is below V1.
Yes, it would be. Yeah, it would be on a. Probably the lowest V1 you're likely to see is around about 120 knots, something like that.
Okay, so okay, no problem stopping there then.
Okay.
No, not at all. And joking aside, yes, you could have bird debris on some of the sensitive parts of the aircraft. So angle of attack sensor. You could have a bird on the pitot probe. You could have all sorts of false indications as a result of the disturbed airflow. And that's even before you start to think about what went into the engines. And if you've hit that many birds, then if you can stop, then that's probably the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, in that situation, obviously, Al and Pip, presumably you'd have both done the same thing. You'd have aborted takeoff and sort of stopped?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, almost definitely. I mean, our V1, which is the speed above which you only stop for sort of serious things, if I can simplify it that way. Our V1 speed is probably a little bit lower. In fact, it's a lot lower than Al's Airbus is going to be. But yeah, if we hit that many birds, I think, unless we're on a very short runway, we'll be stopping.
Right. Okay. I mean, actually, all jokes aside, I mean, that's a heck of you've got seconds to make that decision, though, aren't you? Especially if you're saying like if they're 100. What was the figure? Sorry, explain.
Well, it says 100 knots over the ground, but let's just take that as 100 knots indicated.
And Al was saying sort of usually about sort of like 120. So I mean, that isn't a big gap. Do you know what I mean? Especially if you're full throttle about to sort of go for it, that isn't a huge
it sort of
gap.
Depends how quickly you're accelerating down the runway. I don't know. It's probably a few seconds worth.
Yeah, about 3.
Yeah, so it's just sort of what I'm getting at is essentially you've got a very short window to decide.
Well, I mean, you
kill.
brief these things in advance. You largely know what you're going to be stopping for and what you're not. So the decision almost is already made. Obviously, you can't brief every single thing that you might encounter, but you've got a pretty good idea of what's.
Yeah, I mean, to give you sort of an example, a typical Airbus brief would go along the lines of. We'll consider stopping for anything up to 100 knots.
Right.
Between 100 knots and V1, we were only stopped for an ECAM warning, an engine failure, an engine fire with or without thrust loss, a flight control problem, or anything that would prevent us from safely getting airborne. So the latter one there would come under the category of, well, if I think that there's been so many bird strikes that I've got concerns over airspeed indication, angle of attack indications, then that will be sufficient to stop the takeoff.
Right.
Yeah, and our brief is identical word for word, except we say ECAS rather than ECAM, but there you go. That's splitting hairs.
Indeed. Okay, thanks for that, guys. Nev?
Yes. I can't really add any more to that, really, because... But I think, obviously they made the right decision there.
Yes,
yeah,
but you can bet the Ryanair boys and girls were immediately onto the runway to send all those birds to the catering department.
No, actually, with the subject of birds in Malta, you go to Malta quite often, don't you, Pip?
Yeah, every so often.
Yeah. Now, I'm trying to remember. They have lots of sparrows in Malta, and don't they shoot them?
Oh.
I seem to recall that there's some sort of ornithological. The bird people aren't very happy about the Maltese shooting lots of sparrows. But we do in Europe have various times of year when lots of airports are plagued by birds, it is a big problem, and not just your big Gibraltar butch macho seagulls, but if
they are.
20 or 30 sparrows into an engine, it's still going to cause quite a lot of damage. So there is a lot to be said for managing wildlife on airports, because these are the sort of problems that they cause.
Neil Lamwell's saying that's the migrating songbirds, owl swallows, isn't it?
Right. Okay. I knew they did something there.
Yeah.
So is that an African or a European swallow?
Okay.
I don't know.
Sorry, that's a Monty Python reference.
Isn't it?
I think we need to do a whole episode just about birds, don't we?
Well, like I said, so that's 2 in the can now. We've got one about Brexit and one about birds. Okay. I think we should move on, Nev. What do you reckon?
Yes, and you're going to take the next story, Matt?
Oh, am I? It's me, is it?
Yes.
Sitting there thinking somebody else is right, okay, so we're moving. So this is it the Airliner Watch? Is that the one? Yes?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so Airliner Watch, sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I was too busy.
Is this the one that officially reveals that the TriStar was the worst aeroplane ever built?
No. Airliner Watch is the communication, and the headline is Boeing to launch the 797 NMA officially at Paris Air Show in June 2019. Do you know that's one of the things we ought to try and get to, the Paris Air Show? Have either of you guys ever been?
No, it's very tradey.
Oh, right,
and,
okay. We'd never get in, essentially.
Well, it's very, very corporate, and I don't think it's actually anywhere near as good for displays as Farnborough, to be honest.
All right.
It's not. I have been, and I had a very nice experience, actually.
Okay.
But probably need to move on from that.
No, I was very lucky. It was a couple of years ago, and just briefly, we because the airfield shuts obviously while the air show's on, and we flew in to Le Bourget just before it shut, and we had to park somewhere a bit obscure because all the aprons were closed for the show. So we taxied over and parked up. And then we were there for a few hours while the air show was on. It was a lovely hot day, so I was able to get some nice cold drinks out and some pillows, and we sat up on the wing on the Hawker and watched these fantastic displays, which were immediately above us, which is a total no-no as far as spectators and air shows go. But it was fab. We could feel the reheat off the jets as they were doing their manoeuvres barely 100 feet above us. That was quite a special experience.
A seriously cool experience. Yeah, no, I'll give you that. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, seriously. So Seattle, Dennis Muhlenberg, the Boeing boss, revealed nothing new about Boeing's long-discussed NMA program at Farnborough Air Show this year. But internally, Boeing follows a precise timeline for its new mid-market airplane that is unofficially dubbed the 797 by the industry. Teams in Seattle are working towards a program launch announcement at the Paris Air Show in June 2019. John Ostrower reports in his blog, The Air Current. Around $15 billion development cost of the 797 leaves little room for error, said Muhlenberg in the wake of the Farnborough Air Show in London last July. Since 2015, the idea of a mid-sized airliner with 228 to 268 seats is on the Boeing's agenda to fill the gap in the market. Here is the timeline of Boeing's NMA program, according to the aviation journalist on John Ostrower. So in December 2018, the deadline for engine offers was the deadline for the engine offers from manufacturers. February 2019, Boeing makes its final decision for the engine. March 2019, airlines and leasing companies sign preliminary contracts, and June 2019, program launch of the 797 with the first customers at the Paris Air Show. Rolls-Royce is entering the engine tender. I bet everyone's a bit nervous about that right now. With Trent's successor geared ultrafan, according to reports earlier. CFM throws a concept based on the 777X engine, the GE9X, and Pratt & Whitney wants to offer an upgraded version of its PW1100G that powers the Airbus A321neo. Boeing's all-new commercial jetliner will have two variants, the 228-seat 797-6X with a range of 5,000 nautical miles, and the 268-seat 797-7X with a range of 4,200 nautical miles. Delta, United, Norwegian, and Air Lease Corporation are considered potential customers to receive the aircraft from 2025. Boeing's European rival Airbus is currently evaluating the feasibility of an A321XLR as a competitor to the 797 that could already be available in 2020. 322. So the XLR, I presume, means extreme long range or something, does it?
Or you can plug a mic into it.
Or you can plug a mic into it. Yes, absolutely. Yes. I wonder if it has phantom power, Nev. Anyway, yeah, indeed. So what are we thinking about that? I mean, I presume they're doing it because there is a call for these, what they call like the mid, the mid-sized aircraft.
I think there's this. This is why there's a big sector in the market now between Boeing and Airbus for these ultra long range economical aircraft for the long routes, it's very popular with passengers, I think, and also the running costs are likely to be quite low as well, I would imagine. Absolutely. It looks like that market with the A321 XLR and A321 Neo and the longer range 777. There's certainly the market and the appetite for it, I think.
Agreed.
Very much so. I mean, it's the 757 replacement, isn't it? And seemingly Boeing are not going to do a repeat of the 737 where they just took a 737, put some new tellies in it, give it a bit of a spruce up and called it a MAX, and left the overhead panel looking like, the 1950s when it was designed. So I guess they're starting from a clean sheet, which will bring it with it some increased design costs and some problems, but I think it's the way to go because there were a certain number of people saying, well, let's just snazz up the 757, but whilst it was a fantastic aeroplane, there was so much of it that it needed to be snazzed up to meet the new regulations and criteria that it was always going to be a bad decision, in my humble opinion, to do that. So, clean sheet, and it is a very, very big market because if we look at the carriers who are doing high density across the Atlantic, the likes of Norwegian, the Uniteds who are operating the old Continental 757s, there is a big market for doing this. And the 75 struggled a little bit at high seat volume to do the Atlantic, but it will be a success so long as Airbus don't beat them to it. And I think the 321 XLR may well beat them to it, and the early bird gets the worm in this case.
Yeah, certainly. Just moving on then to the next story, which is for you, Pip. We talk about lots of things on the show, but pilots' facial hair management is a new one, I think.
Okay, actually, I wasn't prepared because I thought you were going to go to Al with this one, but that's fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I probably was, wasn't I?
Okay, I can do the beard.
Oh, well, that was a good start. Fine, Al can have it.
Okay, I'll use the beard then. So, so this comes from AvWeb, and it says, "Pilot beard ban debunked." Canadian researchers say they have debunked the long-held belief that facial hair interferes with the seal on pilot oxygen masks, and at least one airline has lifted its decade-old beard ban. Now, I should point out that it's only North America that has banned beards for pilots, and elsewhere in the developed world, we've not had an issue with beards, and funnily enough, none of us have expired through having a beard.
Right.
But notwithstanding this, Air Canada, which commissioned the Simon Fraser University, says that its pilots can now sport beards up to a maximum length of 12.5 millimeters. Oh, it's half an inch. I thought that was a very precise measurement. And neatly trimmed. So obviously there's going to be in crew rooms now people going around saying, "Can I measure your bush?"
Okay.
So the airline hasn't exactly said why it paid the Environmental Medicine and Psychology Unit at SFO to test the beard hypotheses in its hyperbaric chamber, but the facilities director was unequivocal about the results. The no beard policy was based on an outdated research on obsolete equipment and testing on respirators not intended for aircrew oxygen delivery. We found no adverse effects on bearded subjects within the two parameters of our study, said Sherry Ferguson. So there we have it. the Canadians have proved what everyone else has known for years, that there's nothing wrong in having a beard.
Right, good.
Pip, have you got anything to add to that?
Danger, Will Robinson, danger.
Only more double entendres and dirty jokes, so you may as well move on.
Oh, dear.
Well, luckily, the next story is for you, Pip.
Actually, just before we move on,
Oh, yes.
There was, a long time ago, some relevance to this, because a lot has been made about the fact that the facial hair on ladies and gentlemen will prevent the oxygen mask in the event of a depressurization from fitting properly. But also, because it's pure oxygen that comes out of that mask initially, there has been fears in the past that for ladies and gentlemen who wear beard wax, that the beard wax in the presence of pure oxygen might combust. So
Really?
I am not aware of too many ladies and gents wearing wax on their facial hair these days. So I think we can pretty much put this story into the history bin.
And it's not actually oxygen cylinders, is it? That's in the
It is for the pilots.
Yes.
Is it? Right. Okay.
It comes straight out of a bottle, whereas the passengers, it's a chemical reaction.
Mix. Yeah.
And
okay.
it's sort of mixed with cabin air. But no, for us, it's bottled. It's the good stuff.
Oh.
100% pure Colombian
Oxygen.
oxygen.
Yeah. Okay. Very.
It's
good.
actually more pure than medical or medicinal oxygen.
Is it? Really?
Yes.
Why is that?
Yeah.
Why are you so special?
It's good stuff as well. I often
Oh, do you?
leave
Right.
in the morning if I'm not quite with it. We'll whip out the mask and have a good old suck.
Right. Okay. Good.
I mean,
That's not
Mars,
something.
You can't beat a good suck first thing in
That's
the morning.
obviously
Yeah.
not
Absolutely
something that we should be confessing here on Plain Talking.
Well, no,
UK.
it's a testing procedure.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. All right.
Because when you get on the aircraft, you do need to make sure that it's working properly, so
Okay.
it needs to be rigorously tested.
Okay. Yes. What?
No, and generally there's nothing wrong with taking the oxygen mask out and sticking it on your face for a bit.
Okay. just.
Good stuff. And in fact, in the States, it's a required thing above certain altitudes, isn't it? If one pilot leaves the cockpit, the other guy has to stick the mask on
Okay.
Absolutely.
and breathe it. We don't have that here, as Al said. We're in a slightly more enlightened part of the world.
Right.
Well, we've joined the 21st century. We eat with knives and forks, not our hands.
Yeah. No, actually, I must just stick up for our American friends here. There's certainly an amount of common sense in that rule. I must admit, when on the Lemon now, we're regularly going up to 45,000 feet, and the time of useful consciousness up there, if one of the doors goes pop, is literally a few seconds. And unfortunately, we don't have the full Eros mask on the Phenom. It's a double affair, and it's just not quite as handy dandy as the Hawker and other aeroplanes were. So it does take a few seconds to whip it out and untangle the thing and get it on your face. So if we're up there at 45,000 and he goes to the loo or something, then I do quite often just at least take it out and have it on my lap.
Right. Wow.
Just to say, just in case, in that 1 in a million chance that we do get a sudden rapid depressurization, just an extra few seconds, I might save
Could make
myself
all the
to
difference.
put the mask on.
Yeah, indeed. I can't read any of the comments out that are in the chat room currently, which is a real shame. But
And of course, when I am on my own in the cockpit, I'd like to put it on and do Darth Vader impressions.
of course, absolutely, it must be a that sort of thing.
Yes.
Yes.
Very
Yes,
much. That's
Neil.
just
Neil.
a-
Yeah. So I'm going to be a little bit. So Neil Lamorne says that whipping it out at 45,000 feet is always risky. That's concern.
You've got to be quick, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, indeed, absolutely.
Bands because of the air pressure.
Right. Okay. Danger. Nev, help, Nev, please. God.
Well, this I think this story might suit Pip, actually.
Oh, sorry, you're right. I've been babbling away and I've not the foggiest idea what story
you were supposed to be
What
reading
number
the
is it,
story.
please?
He's been busy whipping it out.
It's number 8.
Load it up.
Yes.
Number 8. Oh, right, here we go. So I'm going to mention...
In at number 8.
in at number 8, if I can get the flipping story to load up. I'm going to mention
In one. Sorry. No.
a dirty word, if I may.
Oh.
A disgusting, filthy word.
Oh dear. Is it
Which
Boeing?
everyone's going to suck their teeth and go...
Okay.
and
TriStar?
it's-
No, sorry.
No, and at least I think this story's to do with that. And it's the B word.
Boeing.
Brexit.
Oh dear. Oh.
Ugh.
I'm glad I was sat
So-
down for that.
This is the story is from the ch-aviation.com website. Easyjet shifts pilot licenses from the UK to Austria.
Ooh.
And this is a bit of a Brexit-related thing. So EasyJet, which is based in London Luton, has said it would assist its 1,400 pilots. No, EasyJet's got way more than 1,400 pilots, surely.
I'm sure they have, yeah.
But yeah, they've got about 300 aircraft, I guess, have they? So
I would think it's more. Maybe that's just the UK pilots.
yes, I think that probably is.
Yes. Okay, let's start again. EasyJet UK has said it will assist its 1,400 pilots to relocate their licenses from the United Kingdom jurisdiction to Austria as part of preparations for the worst-case scenario, no-deal Brexit. See, I told you it was about Brexit. This is a quote from someone, depending on the outcome of the Brexit negotiations, UK-issued pilot licenses after the UK leaves the European Union could no longer be valid within the EU. That's why we have worked with the UK's CAA and Austrocontrol to come up with a solution, the airline spokesperson said. The process of relocation is due to commence in November 2018. It would only include pilots who would continue to be employed by EasyJet and EasyJet UK. Pilots only operating within the UK or holding German-issued pilot licenses will be excluded. Why German pilot licenses? The UK said should leave the European Union by the end of March 2019, although it is so far not clear on what terms that will happen and whether there will be a transition period. Let me read the last sentence. Besides setting up a separate UK unit, EasyJet already launched an Austrian subsidiary, EasyJet Europe, which is based in Vienna, to prevent adverse effects of a no-deal Brexit. So there you go.
Yes, I must admit, Theresa May has been on telly today, hasn't she, sort of talking about said subject. But forgive my naivety here, perhaps I've not understood the story correctly, but presumably what's confusing me a little bit about this is saying, that how the UK issued licenses after the UK leaves the European Union could no longer be valid, but presumably pilots. But pilots in the US presumably can land here at Heathrow. I mean,
that's not the issue. So I don't know the exact setup of EasyJet, but so if you've got a UK pilot, a CAA registered licensed pilot, I should say, flying on a G registered aircraft, so a UK registered aircraft, there's not going to be an issue there, but I think EasyJet also have some aircraft registered in other places like Switzerland,
right?
Which will then
fall under Austria.
So that those aircraft fall under the jurisdiction of those countries, which are part of the EASA domain, which is the European-wide licensing authority. So if potentially one scenario is if we leave the Brexit with no deal, then our UK CAA is no longer part of the EASA, and therefore there's no sort of cross-agreement for UK licensed pilots to be flying European-registered aircraft.
Right. Okay. Is that a serious?
Potentially. I mean, it's only paperwork. It's only red tape you're talking about. It's not like suddenly UK pilots don't know how to fly a European-registered aircraft. Nothing's changed. It's just a paper, it's just a signature somewhere, but it's all politics. It's just
I must admit I'm getting quite bored of politics now. It has to be. I have to be.
But
honest.
I mean, my company is in a very similar situation, and it's almost October already, and we're still not sure how we're going to play it because approximately a third of our pilots are Brits with UK licenses, and we're flying exclusively European registered aircraft. All our aircraft are registered in Portugal, and so we're governed, at least the flying operation side is governed by ANAC, which is the Portuguese flying authority. So we've got a bit of a conundrum, whereas we've got now several hundred pilots with UK licenses who potentially can't fly our aircraft come next April. But even more than that, here's a funny one. We might potentially have no pilots who could fly our aircraft because all of our sim instructors and examiners, and in fact the simulators themselves, whether they're located here in UK or across in the States, are authorised by the UK CAA. So we might have a situation where the European pilots who can fly the aircraft, but they can't go to the sims and they can't have their licenses validated by the UK registered examiners.
Because they're
And at
not
the same
part
time,
of-
we can have
yeah.
our licenses. The UK pilots can have their licenses authorised by UK examiners, but we can't fly the European aircraft. So it's all a bit silly,
But potentially quite serious.
potentially quite serious. I would wager heavily that all this will be sorted with some
solution will
deal
be,
or some
yeah,
transition period. A common sense, I'm sure,
will eventually
prevail
prevail.
at some point before March.
The way it will go is kind of how I envisaged things were discussed in the immediate aftermath of September the 11th in 2001 in the United States, where some politicians said, right, that's it, we're not having anybody travelling on the jump seat anymore, that's it, we're not having, that risk. And then someone piped up and said, actually, none of the airlines will be able to operate any flights. Oh, okay, well, that's okay then, we'll let them carry on.
Yeah.
And this will be a very sort of similar set of circumstances. The politicians will all make these big statements, and there will be these various political manoeuvrings. And come with the moment, Easyjet are going to be affected, BA will be affected. There will be very few unaffected airlines. So someone is in the end going to go, well, just carry on for the time being and we'll sort it out.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a good point. It's Neil has suggested in the chat room perhaps that it's almost as if nobody planned this, which I think is quite an interesting one. It's just I don't know, and I don't know. I'd like to think that eventually common sense will prevail and all this silly nonsense will be overlooked.
Well, you would think so, but then you look at the people managing this on our behalf, and you do have to wonder.
Okay.
Because there's not a shred of common sense amongst them.
Wow, that's yes. Right. Okay.
Well, I think the problem is with most politicians, they're so far removed from the regular person.
Yeah.
That they live in a bubble, and most of this will largely not affect them. So they, it's like I can't remember who it was. Was it David Cameron who was asked about the price of a loaf of bread and a pint of milk, and he broadly confessed he didn't have a clue. And these politicians are going to be totally and utterly clueless about the effects, regardless of which side of which camp you sit in. And I genuinely believe that, it will take years to sort out, but it will be, because the world's not going to come to an end.
Yeah. I mean, you can't expect the politicians to have a sort of in-depth grasp of all the issues, but they got to give a chance to the people who do have a grasp to sort this out. And if we're, like I say, it's October already, and we're looking at pressing the big red button at the end of March, it's just a few months away. You've got to give the authorities a chance to sort this out, and they're leaving it jolly late.
I suppose in defence of the authorities involved, of course, because nobody's made their mind up about what actually is going to happen, it's difficult for those authorities then to plan for something that they don't know
exactly
is what
but I suppose
one
advantage possibly is that it affects them, the other side, if you want to be adversarial about it, it affects them almost as much as it affects us.
Yeah,
so it's in everyone's interest to sort this nonsense out.
Indeed. Anyway, we're in danger of having a Brexit-related conversation, so we're going to move on.
Well, I did warn you.
Yeah, Nev, abort.
Right, this is an interesting one on the BBC website, and just I think it was yesterday. This went out, and it's all about Jet Airways, and it says that more than 30 Indian passengers, some bleeding from their noses and ears, have received treatment after pilots forgot to turn on a switch regulating cabin pressure. Officials said. Jet Airways Flight 9W697 from Mumbai to Jaipur turned back shortly after takeoff. Videos tweeted by passengers aboard the plane showed oxygen masks deployed inside the aircraft. The Boeing 737, which was carrying 166 passengers, landed safely. The Aviation Ministry said the cockpit crew had been taken off duty pending an investigation. Lalit Gupta, a senior official of India's aviation regulator, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, told the Hindustan Times newspaper that the crew had forgotten to select a switch to maintain cabin pressure. Jet Airways said in a statement that Thursday morning's flight had turned back due to loss in cabin pressure and regretted the inconvenience caused to its passengers. The Boeing 737 aircraft with 166 guests and 5 crew landed normally in Mumbai. All guests were deplaned safely and taken to the terminal. First aid was administered to a few guests who complained of ear pain, bleeding nose, etc., the statement said. The airline said it was cooperating fully with the DGCA investigation. And passenger Darshak Hathi tweeted a video of the interior of the cabin as air pressure dropped and oxygen masks came down. There's something that's not quite right about this story for the way it's reported. I don't know whether Pip and Al can chime in here, but I would imagine if you're taking off from Mumbai, it's quite warm, and maybe the aircraft was reasonably well loaded with people and fuel, so it's quite a hot temperature takeoff potentially. So don't you often do a sort of a packs off takeoff for those sort of situations? And if you did, it says that it turned back shortly after takeoff. Well, it wouldn't have reached anywhere near 10,000 feet at that point, I would presume. So that's the critical altitude, I would have thought. But obviously, I don't know. So anybody got any other thoughts on it?
Well,
I do.
Yes, Scott. I was going to say you've flown the 737, so you've probably got a better idea.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Nev, in so much as that it would be fairly normal to turn the air conditioning packs off for takeoff. Gives you more performance, and I'm desperately trying to think back, but typically it would be 14,000 feet that the masks would deploy rather than 10. So, but they say it turned back shortly after takeoff. It largely depends on what your definition of shortly. So, that's within 10 minutes. So that's shortly after takeoff. So yes, on the 737, there is no indication that you've not turned the packs on after takeoff until it starts dinging at you because of cabin altitude. So a lot of aircraft, say for example the Airbus, if you don't turn the packs back on as you go through 1,500 feet, it will come up with a caution to tell you that the packs are off, which is in quite a timely fashion, whereas the Boeing strategy is that that there is no caution, it just goes straight into the warning. So now it may well have been that they forgot to put the packs back on, and as happened in the past when the cabin high altitude, it was more of a klaxon really goes off, because don't forget these are quite old aircraft in design. There's nothing subtle about the warning systems. It's quite conceivable that the two pilots have gone, "What's that funny noise?"
Right. Okay.
and that has actually happened, and if I remember rightly, the warning noise is very similar to the gear not down.
Right.
So there have been a few occasions where people have been trying to diagnose a gear problem and failing to notice that it's actually a cabin altitude issue.
Right.
So there you go.
Here's my question for you, Al. That being the case, if they manage to get to some reasonable altitude without turning the packs on, and then they realise their mistake and then turned them on, at what sort of rate do you think would the aircraft pressurise? Because I'm trying to work out why people had bleeding eyes and noses and all this kinds of stuff. Because unless just being in an unpressurised aircraft isn't going to make your ears explode, but the rate of change would. And I can't see an unpressurised 737 or any aircraft really climbing at such a rate as to cause that sort of injury. So
no. So I
maybe
wonder,
when they switch the packs on, does it pressurise at some ridiculous rate? Do you think?
It may well do, because it's an old design, and it's the air conditioning on the 737, if you've ever travelled on it, is not subtle. Let's put it that way. But I also wonder whether when the pilots realised that this was a high cabin altitude warning, that they just didn't go into emergency descent mode, and having had the cabin climbing at let's just say 3,000 feet per minute, the cabin now started to descend at 10,000 feet per minute in an emergency descent.
Yeah, well, if they're doing an emergency descent from 10 or 12,000 feet.
Well, I wonder whether they
got
got up
questionable.
I wonder whether they got up to 20,000 feet before.
Well, how could they not notice at 20,000 feet? But there's some obvious things. But the other comment I was going to make, the only other comment, forgetting to turn the packs on. It's a bit type specific. We'd have to do that on the Hawker. It's all automatic on the Phenom, of course. On the Hawker, we would generally turn it on with the gear up. But sometimes you would forget, or maybe there was a problem, it wasn't working. But that would be immediately apparent, even if there's no ding-dong or siren going off. To anyone who's used to flying, you'd immediately feel that pressure change in your ear.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
Immediately. It's unmissable.
Well, that's quite interesting, actually, because we... on the Airbus, quite often do for noise abatement delayed packs on takeoff, and I've never noticed it. I've never noticed.
Maybe I've got hypersensitivity. Generally, I suppose on our BizJets we do climb at quite a rate. 4,000 feet a minute would not be uncommon at all.
Difference, yeah.
But what do you typically climb at initially in a bus? 2,000 or 3,000 feet a minute?
Yeah, 2.5 would be.
I would have thought you'd notice that.
Just out of interest, they're talking about cabin pressurization and things here. But is the system exactly the same in the cockpit as well? Is it the same system essentially, so it's across the entire aircraft, or is there a different system?
I see what you mean.
Dealing with
maybe that's type specific, but I would have thought that.
Yeah, broadly so. I can't remember enough about the 737 air conditioning system, but to go to the Airbus, which I do know, there are 2 air conditioning packs.
Right.
Both feed the aircraft cabin. One has slightly more air coming out of it directed towards the cockpit than the cabin than the other. So it's not a straight, simple statement that Pack 1 goes to the cockpit and Pack 2 goes to the cabin. There is a slight bias, but yes, it's the same air.
Okay, right.
And actually, Matt, you generally, at least the aircraft I've flown, it's generally regulated by controlling the air leaving the aircraft rather than the air coming in. It's the outflow valves usually at the back of the aircraft, and you're controlling how much air is leaving as opposed to coming in.
What I'm getting at here with my line of inquiry essentially is, why didn't the pilots notice that it felt wrong? If you see what I mean, why didn't the pilots notice that the cabin pressure didn't feel right?
Well, that was my point. I'm my experience, that would be immediately obvious.
Yeah.
As your ears start to go mad as you're climbing up.
Yeah, I'm maybe not a good example of this, because actually on any flight that I've ever been, I have terrible trouble getting my ears to.
Where did they take off from? I forget what the story said. Was it a relatively high altitude airport to begin with?
It was Mumbai to Jaipur. Yeah, so Mumbai.
All right, I don't know how high Mumbai is. But...
Okay. Anyway, we could go on for ages.
Not very, if I remember rightly. Not. It's not alpine, let's put it that way.
No. Mm-hmm. Okay. Some very interesting points there, gents, though. We'll move on if we may. The next story is one that's... well, in fact, all the stories this week have been sent to us by our listeners. More about that later. The Forbes.com is the website, and the headline is JetBlue founder David Neeleman planning a new US airline with a curious strategy. So the world's most prolific and arguably successful founder of pleasantly unconventional airlines is returning home from Brazil to launch his third US and fourth North American-based airline. Serial airline entrepreneur David Neeleman walked away, or depending on whose account of the story you believe, was pushed out of JetBlue, the most famous and successful of the airlines he started back in 2008. But months later, he launched a copycat carrier in Brazil called Azul, which Blue in both Portuguese and Spanish, which today ranks as South America's third largest airline. Now, Neeleman is seeking $100 million in investment money to launch yet another new carrier, according to media reports. It tentatively would be called Moxie, a name that, should it actually be used, would be a not so subtle poke at those who over the last 4 decades have dismissed or warred with with Neilman. Given Neilman's successful track record and his own wealth, earned mostly from taking his startup carriers public, finding launch capital for a new airline normally wouldn't be difficult, but Moxie's reported strategic approach would be considered risky if it weren't Neilman pushing the plan. That plan reportedly will focus on providing point-to-point service primarily to and from secondary airports. Air Finance Journal was the first to report on Neilman's new plans, although rumours of Nielsen's return to the US market have been circulating for more than a year. According to the Airline Weekly, among the potential airports to receive Moxie service are Hollywood Burbank Airport, Fort Worth's Meacham Airport, and TF Green Airport in Providence.
Rhode Island.
Thank you, Rhode Island. Thank you. Yeah, I was trying to work out where that was. Each is an interesting target because it's hard to argue that limited service from such airports would be effective in competition against massive amounts of service offered at nearby airports. Hollywood Burbanks Airport is small in comparison with nearby Los Angeles International Airport, which serves more than 84 million passengers annually. Still, with more than 4 million passengers annually, it's hard to argue that Hollywood Burbank is underserved. Green Airport in Providence is located about an hour's drive from both Boston Logan International Airport and Bradley Airport in Hartford, Connecticut. Yet, with a population of just 180,000, it's hard to conclude that the city is underserved when Green Airport serves just under 4 million passengers a year. And while Fort Worth, with a population of nearly 900,000, is the largest city in the nation without any commercial air service within its boundaries, it is part owner of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport midway between those two cities. And although Meacham Airport is only 6 miles north of city's downtown, for most residents of the sprawling city DFW Airport, it is only a slightly longer drive and offers more than 900 departures a day to 176 US and 57 foreign destinations. As a result, multiple attempts to provide commercial service at Meacham Airport since DFW opened in 1974 have all met with quick failure. I won't sort of go into that really, but do we... I don't know. I mean, surely more competition is good, right? Especially in the US. I mean, one of the things that I have learned from various chats with our US friends is that there isn't really that much of what I call like a low-cost model. They don't have like a Ryanair, if you like, that is making flights so very cheap in the US in comparison to what we experience here in Europe. I mean, we're almost spoiled, really, aren't we?
And probably the exception is someone like, Southwest, I would imagine, and one or two others. But also,
I think Southwest is probably the EasyJet equivalent, and I think Spirit are the Ryanair equivalent in the US.
Okay.
Yeah. And also that since deregulation, obviously, anybody can start up an airline as long as they meet the FAA criteria for all this.
Yeah,
so,
and the money, presumably.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Not a cheap experience, but if anybody can pull it off, I guess David Neilman would be. He's certainly got a track record for doing so, hasn't he? So. Good luck.
Absolutely. And later on in the article, it says that he's already placed a non-binding order for 60 A220 jets from Airbus.
Oh, okay. Now, that's the new one we saw at Farnborough, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. See. No, okay, right. Yes, just me chuffed about that then. Moving on then. So, who's going to take the next one, Nev?
This is for Captain L, I think. This one, isn't it? Yes.
Yes. Okay. So just loading this little baby up then. This comes from agjc.com. And I've got no idea what that particular publication is.
Ask Pip, he's the one that found it.
Yeah, but nonetheless, the
I'm
headline...
glad Al's reading this one.
Yeah.
Actually. You continue, boy.
Yeah. Well, I've just loaded it up, and the website did that sort of crashing thing where everything just shrinks down, all the HTML disappears.
It's done the same on my iPad as well.
Yeah, Delta pilot accused of lying about mental health issues to keep flying. This was written by Leon Stafford, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. A Delta Airlines pilot from Fayette County has been indicted on charges he misled government officials about his mental health so he could keep flying. Adam Asselson, aged 39, of Peachtree City, is accused of falsifying Federal Aviation Administration medical records required to obtain airman medical certificates, critical to determining a pilot's fitness to fly. The FAA alleges that Asselson, who joined Delta in 2017, according to his Facebook page, nothing like quoting factual evidence then, admitted, I'm presuming that it's not the FAA who are using Facebook to determine his
let's hope not.
employment.
No. Let's hope not.
Anyway, admitted that he had, omitted that he had sought help from Department of Veteran Affairs for what the indictment describes as major depressive disorder. Instead, Asselson, who had been a pilot, in the U.S. Air Force, is said to have told the agency he received the VA disability benefits for knee strain and tinnitus. Asselton's attorney could be immediately reached for comment. I suspect that there's a could not be immediately reached for comment. Delta said in a statement that Asselton is no longer actively flying for the carrier. Delta pilots are held in the highest standards of professionalism, honesty and integrity, spokeswoman Catherine Simmons said. Once made aware of the situation, we opened an internal investigation and are working cooperatively with the authorities. The indictment came as the FAA has begun to compare VA records with pilot information to avoid the possibility of having someone at the controls who has mental health issues. The downing of Germanwings Flight 9525 in 2015 put a spotlight on mental health after the plane's co-pilot, who had been treated for suicidal tendencies and had been ruled unfit to work, but kept the diagnosis secret, intentionally crashed a plane into a mountainside in the Alps.
As you do.
Yes, or as you try to avoid. Asselson is one of 4 airline pilots from across the nation indicted in August in the U.S. District Court of San Francisco for making false statements to the FAA in their medical certificates paperwork. The 4 men, who are receiving disability benefits from the VA for mental health issues, are accused of neglecting to disclose information that would have disqualified them from operating aircraft. Asselson was arrested on August 28th and released on a $10,000 bond, according to records. The indictment did not name the disorder from which Asselson allegedly suffers. He is set for his first appearance on October the 3rd in the U.S. District Court in San Francisco. He faces a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison and a fine of $250,000 if convicted. Apologies for making a bit of a pig's ear of reading that. It was a combination of elements. But yeah, this is one of those sort of stories, really, where you might look at it on face value and say, that's terrible, that's despicable. How could he not have the integrity to come clean about, his past and whatever? But the situation with regards to pilot medicals is a very difficult one, and it's a fine balancing act, because it's quite conceivable that in his own mind he didn't think that he had a problem that he felt that he needed to disclose.
Right.
So it all really revolves around the medical agencies talking to each other, or in this particular case, not talking to each other.
Yeah, it's and also, I mean, if this was a reasonable amount of time ago, I mean, it almost seems unfair to, it's something that, I don't know. I guess the Germanwings thing has made everybody understandably quite sort of nervous, twitchy, perhaps, about sort of mental health and all that kind of thing. But
yeah, I mean, pilots generally, rightly or wrongly, do sort of view their medical practitioners with a slight suspicion, almost as the enemy. They're ready to take our licenses away from us, and actually, that's not that's quite far from the truth. No one wants to take your license away, and at least in this part of the world, the medical authorities will make every effort to find a way to keep you going. Or
people will talk to each other and sort of,
maybe
help
and
you
it's just a shame that he felt that this particular case was not something he could discuss with his AME, because it's not necessarily a bar to flying or to holding a medical certificate.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, as a slight parallel, I'm about to revalidate my medical in the next few weeks. For me, it's every year. And as part of that, I have to go off to an optometrist, an optician, to have my eyesight checked. And very long story cut short, it's a new optician. And so I'm trying to explain all the various requirements that the CAA require. And we're in the midst of the examination. And he says to me, "Oh, we've got a bit of a problem." And my immediate thought was, no, I could do without any bits of problems, because the way that the CAA will respond to any bit of a problem is just going to be lengthy, laborious, and more hoop jumping. Yeah. And he could just immediately see my reaction. And he went, no, I apologise. He said the thread on the screw of your glasses isn't working properly. We're going to need to get a new screw for your glasses.
Wow. Okay.
I did say to him,
I thought you were going to say that you'd gone into the dentist rather than the optician.
Well,
yeah.
It can genuinely be a nerve-wracking experience.
Yeah, I bet.
I had been with my AME for the last, at least dozen years, and I knew him, and I was comfortable with him. But he retired last year, so I had to go and see a new AMA this year, a few months ago. And honestly, it was horrendous, the most nerve-wracking experience I've ever had. And it's totally irrational. There's no need for that. But, it's someone new, and your license is so precious to you.
Yeah.
It's everything. If you lose that, it's your mortgage, it's your kids, it's
absolutely,
it's everything.
The thing is that we all know, and we've all come across people within the industry, and they go, "You've not seen Bob for a while. Oh, didn't you know Bob's lost his medical?" No.
Oh, wow.
And every year, you hear about people who lose their medical, and more so for me than Pip. As you get older, you start to have more concerns about various aspects, because you start to have to wear glasses, and then after a little while, well, now you need reading glasses as well. And this is just one facet of the medical, your eyesight, and there's all sorts of other bits that are under scrutiny. And of course, as you get older, they become more under scrutiny. So I'm over 45, so you have to have a hearing test every couple of years, and think, right, okay, well, I know I can't hear as well as I used to, but am I now borderline? Is there going to be an issue or a repercussion? So it is quite nerve-wracking, even with someone that you've had a professional relationship for quite a long period of time, because your livelihood is in their hands.
Yeah, literally in their hands. I mean, it's I don't know. I'm lucky at the moment because I'm not at that point. I think 45. I think it is in the coach world or bus driving world where you have to start. For your D license. I think 45 is when you have to start having a medical. And I ain't gonna lie, especially as I'm a well insulated gentleman. I'm rather nervous about when I suddenly have to go for my first medical.
You wait till you get to 55, mate. In our county, you have an appointment with a camera.
A camera?
And we're not talking snappy snaps either.
No. Okay.
A quick question for
The
Al.
only thing that snaps are the gloves on the operative hand, aren't they? Go ahead, Pip. Sorry, I digress.
Al, since all this German wing stuff, as you know, there's been a requirement for AMEs to assess our mental health. What approach has your AME taken, if any?
My AME has taken quite a pragmatic approach to it. Firstly, he will, openly admit that he has a very short period of time to try to make some sort of assessment. You're usually in there for an hour and a half. So,
what?
Secondly,
an hour and a half?
Yeah, well, by the time you have a chat and, you
Good
know.
Lord, what sort of tests and probes have you been requesting?
Well, like I said, I'm older than you, so,
15
you know.
minutes.
Well,
By the time you swap videos and that.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
by the time you've had your ECG, by the time you've had your hearing test done and your eyesight test done, it takes a while.
Wow.
But anyway, the other thing he says that he has a short period of time to make assessment. He's not a trained psychiatrist. His field
Right.
isn't mental health. And, he will also say to you that just like people who have alcohol problems, people with mental health problems are very good at hiding them.
Yeah, by definition, yeah.
My past AME took the direct approach. He said, "So, Pip, do you feel like killing yourself?" No,
Wow.
Doctor. Right, let's tick that one off.
Okay. Right. I mean, it's an unusual approach. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
well,
effective.
it's as
It's
good as any.
effective. Oh, wow. Okay. Right. And how did you answer that one, just out of interest?
Usually, no, if you want to keep your license.
Okay. Yeah. No, yeah. Good. Yes. Yeah. Good answer. Yeah. Good. Wow. Okay. Right. Well, I'm not really sure where we got to. I think
Well,
that's.
it's the last story, and I think Pip's going to read this one.
Ah, yes. Okay. Cool.
I have got it loaded up and ready to go. This is from theage.com.au. Tiger Air Australia grounded plane over botched maintenance work. Ooh. Budget airline Tiger Air Australia grounded one of its jets for 3 weeks last month after it flew back to Australia for maintenance work in the Philippines with serious undetected faults.
Oh.
The incident has prompted parent company Virgin Australia to end all maintenance work at the facility owned by Singapore Airlines, which owns a 20% stake of Virgin, and has raised questions about Tiger Air's and the air safety regulators' oversight of offshore maintenance work. How long is this story? So I'm scrolling down. It's a very long story, so let's just get the basics here. Sorry, I scrolled down too far. Tiger Air flew one of its 3 Boeing 737s to Clark International Airport near the Filipino city of Angels on July 17th to undergo heavy maintenance work. The jet returned to Melbourne with only crew on board 2 weeks later on July 31st, and Tiger Air engineers discovered that a modification to the plane's cargo bay smoke evacuation system had been installed incorrectly. The work was akin to the skills of a home handyman, according to Australian Licensed Aircraft Engineers Association Federal Secretary Steve Pavinas, with unsecured components and wires connected to the wrong terminals.
Oh, wow. That's quite serious.
Yeah, the fault required extensive repair work, followed by testing, which meant the jet was sitting idle in Melbourne for 3 weeks and forced the airline, which only has 15 planes, to cancel some services. Let me read this one last sentence. Another fault was discovered before the plane's first service flight on August 22nd, when crew found a flight attendant's seatbelt was not properly bolted to the seat.
Oh. Interesting.
All right, let me hang on one more sentence. What concerns us most is other latent defects hidden now, but waiting to resurface at 30,000 feet, someone said. They didn't know about the seatbelts. What else don't they know?
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like the maintenance has been slapdash, shall we say?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, what were we saying earlier about cutting costs by outsourcing to dodgy companies?
Absolutely. Although the statement from this guy, Steve, I mean, of course, he does have a vested interest because he is the secretary of the Australian Licensed Aircraft Engineers Association,
yes.
Okay,
which
yeah.
would be the Australian Engineers Union,
Right.
and therefore, he does have an angle on this story.
Okay, yes, yeah. A vested interest, one might also say. Yeah, okay. I mean, I understand why people are desperate to sort of save money and stuff, but I mean, does it really, does it not hurt to sort of, I don't know, I guess I'm not sort of, I'm not the one writing out the checks, I suppose, but does it hurt not to sort of do it at home sometimes rather
Well, there's a
than
couple of factors here, and it's not just cost sometimes. these checks have to be done at a certain number of cycles, as in takeoff and landing cycles, actually just counted as landings, and a certain number of hours on the airframe. And sometimes you have to take the aeroplane halfway around the world because that's the only place that has the availability to do the check.
To do it when you, of course, yeah.
In the same way as in the UK, when have to MOT your car, and your place that you normally go to, they say, well, I'm very sorry, but we're fully booked.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, right, well, I'll have to go somewhere else then. And then you phone around, and everyone's fully booked. So, okay, well, then I've got to take it to Norwich.
Yeah. Sure.
At the other side of the world.
Yeah, from your part of the world, certainly, absolutely. Not so bad for us here in Bungay, but anyway, there we are. Yes.
But so, I mean, I know that in Monarch Airlines, we took one of our 330s for a major check, and I'm trying to remember where it went. It went to Malaysia for its major check.
I didn't even know they could fly that far.
Oh, yeah. And the maintenance that was done down in Malaysia was done to actually a very high standard. But the reason that it went to Malaysia, bearing in mind that Monarch Airlines had its own in-house engineering department, was that obviously doing outside work is very financially lucrative for a maintenance organisation. Yeah. So they were so busy doing Continental's maintenance that they couldn't do our 330.
Right.
So
it had to go.
And even when you factor into the cost of positioning it out to Kuala Lumpur, it actually was still marginally cheaper. But the reason it went to Malaysia was because that was the cheapest place that could do it in the time frame.
Yeah, had availability when you could afford for it to be out of service, essentially.
Because I think, if I remember rightly, it was down there for 3 weeks, so it's quite a major check.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's 3 weeks of 24-hour working.
Yeah. Yeah, a bit busy time. So it's so not necessarily cost cutting, more just looking for availability when the vehicle is needing to have its work done, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. As is often the case, there's more than one facet to these stories.
Well, possibly, but I don't think many. Well, not all major airlines have their own in-house maintenance anymore.
Ooh. Controversial.
From what I gather, and listen to the APG, for instance, I hear they often send their aircraft to sort of other places in South America or wherever to have their bigger maintenance. I mean, they have their line maintenance, obviously, for the day-to-day things. I mean, even at SafeJets, we used to have our own in-house maintenance, which was based at Northolt in London, but that went the way of the dodo, unfortunately, in a cost-cutting exercise. And now all our maintenance is a third party.
Wow. Okay. But I suppose as long as they're doing it to the high standard, then I guess that there isn't an issue. There's obviously the issue with this story is that it very much wasn't the case. If you see what I mean, it would suggest.
Well,
perhaps...
indeed, and another element to this, of course, is that aircraft are no different in some respects to your own car. Now, you can have your defects on your car rectified to various levels. There's the one that is required for it to be safe and to fulfill the regulatory requirements, in the UK, the MOT, or you could have it, the defects rectified to as close as possible to how it came out of the factory. Now, of course, there'll be a huge difference in cost.
Indeed, this is true.
I always have my car MOT'd in the Philippines.
Of course. Absolutely.
Well, the best place to have your car MOT'd is in the Isle of Man, isn't it?
Right, okay.
Because they don't have an MOT in the Isle of Man.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. But presumably as soon as you bring it back to the UK, it has to be MOT'd. I don't know. Anyway,
well, if you register your car in the Isle of Man, then you'll never have to have an MOT again.
That's
Good
true.
point. Good point. I hadn't thought of that. Well, I think we should move on from this now, Nev. I think it's time to play one of our first segments for this week.
Yes, we've got a couple of segments from that we recorded at Farnborough, which seems a long time ago
It
now.
does,
Suddenly,
yeah.
doesn't it? But
I was just a boy.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. His hair was a different colour.
There's a couple of good ones here, and the first one we're going to play is one of Carlos interviewing Captain Al, and we dragged him kicking and screaming into the Boeing booth at Farnborough. So,
and I'm still receiving the psychological counselling for it.
I'm sure you are. But let's go over to Carlos and see what he's got to say.
Okay, so I'm here with Captain Al. We're in the Boeing Centre here, and Captain Al, you're at home.
Yes, money has changed hands for me to come in here. I'm just checking that the serial numbers aren't the same on the banknotes that you've given me.
I tell you, it cost a fortune to get Al to actually walk into this building, but he's really at home here. He's remarked on how good the models are, especially the Max.
Yes, and one of the Boeing representatives have just told us that they had a little accident here, so I don't know if someone got a bit excited, but it certainly wasn't me.
So Al, you've been here, you've been to the show a few times now in the last few days, haven't you?
Yes.
Have a look. How's it compared to previous years?
It's interesting to see the advancements of technology in the Airbus facility. They're definitely striding ahead. I think when you will see the air show later, you may get to see the A350-1000, which is a beautiful aeroplane, and did a stunning display on Thursday. And next to go was the 787, and if you were to zoom in on the flight deck, you could see the two test pilots going, how can we beat that? How can we beat that? We just might as well not bother. So they put it in the air and did a few turns and then came back and went, yeah, we'll be. And then the 73 Max did something. It got airborne, which is pretty good. So that was two Boeings that got airborne. There we go.
So where we are now in this centre, you've got to admit this is pretty well done by Boeing. You know, I haven't seen the Airbus.
Well, I was going to say you've not.
But you know, they have got the lighting in here is fantastic.
Well, a bit of star cloth and a few spots. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
I
could have
Black
a
Box Discos could do a better job, couldn't they?
Shameless promotion. Yeah, I think
available for weddings, christenings, bar mitzvahs.
So anyway, moving on, Al. You obviously saw the 350-1000.
Yes.
Obviously, and what would you say would be the chances of possibly you flying that in the future?
If I wanted to, I could go and fly it very, very soon. There's opportunities around the world to go and fly the 350. But just for the moment, I'm quite happy with the work-life balance that I have. And the bottom line is, in the global market at the moment, short-haul pilots are paid more than long-haul pilots. So for me, and some of the viewers and listeners will know my recent past with an airline that failed. So money in the bank is key at the moment. So with the exception of certain manufacturers, I'm quite happy to fly anything. I'll just go for the bucks.
Now, on the show, we always talk about how much you and Captain Nick are not impressed with the Boeing product, right? But honestly, there must be some part of Boeing that you like.
No,
Any
not
part.
really. I mean, I have travelled on the 787. I was bitterly disappointed that I didn't get off a 9-hour flight and feel super and fantastic. That might have been because the electronic window blinds failed in middle of the flight, and we were advised by a fairly loud PA announcement telling us that the blinds had failed. It was a bit pointless really because it was dark outside, so no one really cared and everyone was woken from their sleep. No, not really. I'm not feeling the love.
So if you were offered a multi-figure job flying for an airline that just had a Boeing fleet, you wouldn't jump at the chance?
I'm not stupid, Nev. Of course I'd take the cash.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up things here then and move on to could go to the Airbus.
Let's do that.
So, yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that,
Let's do
Carlos.
that.
Did they go to the Airbus thing, Nev? That's the question.
Well, we weren't allowed in, sadly. No. Which was a shame because it was pretty impressive, actually. I think it was quite a... Well, there was a lot of security, wasn't there, on the
yes, there was, yeah.
on the entrance to it. Did you get into the Airbus booth before we'd got there, Al, at all, on the day before?
Yes, I had. I'd sweet-talked myself in there, and I must say that the quality of the champagne was very good.
Right.
The canapes, they were a little bit soggy, but
right.
and they had some nice exhibits to have a look at. And I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that they had the star of the show with the A380.
Yeah, they did.
Parked up there.
Yeah, the high fly.
I think we all would agree, those of us who were lucky to go on it, for a second-hand aircraft, it looked pretty swanky, didn't it?
Was, yeah. Excellent. We got that nice private tour of it as well, didn't we? Which was great. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even a second-hand aeroplane from Airbus completely wiped out the Boeing exhibits.
Right. Okay. Good. I'm so glad that we, it obviously balance is key with our program, and I'm delighted that we were able to offer such balance. Okay. Well, you've done quite well, Al, because we are overrunning. But I've decided we're gonna. Oh dear! Look at him with his badge. I've decided we're gonna plod on anyway, Al, and it's time to do some military. So if you're all ready, boys and girls, here we go.
And grey.
Dear.
Right, okay.
Oh dear, what a cacophony of sound that was.
That's all right. I faded out most of it. We only caught the end of it, I'm afraid.
Oh, you...
I knew what was going to
We can do it again.
No, we can't. It's fine. Absolutely. I'm almost slightly terrified. Right, Nev, I think you've got the first one.
Yeah, this is on the hearts.com website, and it says that Putin says Israel didn't down Russian aircraft. Netanyahu offers condolences. Earlier, Russia blamed downed military aircraft on Israel's deliberate provocations striking Syria. And France denies involvement, and US plane shot down by Syrian air defense systems. So Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Tuesday that Israel was not responsible for the downing of a Russian military aircraft during a strike on Syria on Monday night. It looks like a chain of tragic circumstances because the Israeli plane didn't shoot down our jet, he said. And Putin's comments were a shift in tone after Russia accused Israel earlier of hostile provocation in striking the Syrian port city of Latakia, which led to the downing of a Russian military plane with 15 servicemen on board. When asked about comparisons to Turkey's downing of a Russian aircraft in 2015, Putin said, "This is a different situation. The Turkish fighter jet knowingly downed our plane." The Russian president noted that the defense ministry's statements vowing a retaliatory response was fully coordinated with him. The retaliatory measures will be directed above all to boosting the security of military men and installations in Syria, he said. These will be measures everyone will see. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke on the phone with Putin and expressed his condolences, but added that the responsibility for the downing of the Russian planes rests with Syria. He also reiterated that Israel is determined to prevent Iran from gaining a military foothold in Syria and thwart Tehran's attempt to aid Hezbollah with lethal weapons against Israel. Always a difficult thing when there's political and military stuff going on, and there's always blame being chucked about on both sides with these sorts of things.
Because, and part of me, this is a slightly controversial thing to say on a UK-based media thing, but there is a slim possibility, of course, because he's not quite well renowned for, shall we say, telling the truth.
Yes.
I didn't say that. I just want viewing public to realise I didn't say that. If I were you, Matt, I would be very careful about touching your front door or anything like that.
Yes, yeah, no, good point. Yes, I don't have any plans to go to Salisbury anytime soon, but there we are. Oh, well, never
you're
mind.
quite safe, because as I understand it, they travelled by train to Salisbury. So, you know,
no chance where we are.
All right.
Yeah, no chance. I never had a very pleasant experience going back to London, didn't you, from our local...
from Dis.
Yes, Dis train station. What a treat.
Gosh,
yes.
that was an eye-opener.
Is it still a slam door train on that?
It
was actually, yes. Yeah, it is actually.
Nothing's changed since a few years back then.
No, pretty much not. No, indeed. Anyway, we'll move on to the next story. As I say, we are running out of time a bit, but it is the inews.co.uk. It's the essential briefing, and the headline is RAF creates first joint squadron with another nation since the Second World War. In the dark days of 1940, a grateful British government signed a deal with Poland's exiled armed forces to form 2 new RAF squadrons staffed with battle-hardened Polish pilots and commanded by British officers. The result was a spectacular success. 303 Squadron, one of the 2 Polish units, scored the highest number of enemy kills of any flying Hurricane fighters during the Battle of Britain. Some 78 years later, another appreciative British government this week confirmed it is forming the first joint squadron with another nation since the Second World War. But while the events of 1940 were dictated by the gravest national emergency, the formation of number 12 Squadron, to be based at Coningsby in Lincolnshire, is born from a different set of pressures, namely the need for Britain to maintain its lucrative export of state-of-the-art fighter jets. The new squadron will be staffed by pilots and ground crew from both Qatar and Britain. Wow, that's an unusual... wow. Okay, to provide training as part of a £5 billion deal finally put into action this week to sell the tiny but fabulously wealthy Gulf state 24 Typhoon and 9 Hawk jets produced by British defence giant BAE Systems and its partners. The sale is potent evidence of both Britain's continuing and controversial success in defence exports. It is also proof of just how far ministers are happy to go to reinforce sales by formally pairing with them with the expertise and facilities of the armed forces. One official with knowledge of the deal told the I newspaper that there is a lot of symbolism in forming the new Qatar squadron. Training foreign pilots has always been a necessity as part of our selling aircraft to allies abroad, but forming a joint RAF squadron specifically for the task with all the pomp and ceremony is an attractive tool to enable to deploy to a Gulf ally. The new squadron, which will begin work next year and redeploy to Qatar once the first Typhoons are due for delivery in 2022, is the most visible manifestation of Britain's growing exertions to export weaponry and defence equipment around the globe as it gears up for, and here is that word again, brace yourselves everyone, Brexit. A green paper laying out the government's industrial strategy for a post-Brexit Britain released last year set an expansion of arms sales as a key target. The Ministry of Defence was singled out to work with manufacturers to enhance support for exports. This programme, personally led by Trade Secretary Liam Fox, a former Defence Secretary, appears to be bearing fruit, not hearing fruit at all, as manufacturers and ministers fan out across the globe in search of new or expanded business in the weapons games. Licences granted last year to previously small-scale partners include exports worth £583 million to Turkey, a 322% increase on 2016, a £35 million one to Thailand, that's a 720% increase, and a 9.9 million deal to Botswana, as you do, which is a 4,364% increase. Sales to Bangladesh rose from £104,000 to £38.5 million, an increase of nearly 37,000%. Well, I think it's safe to say that military spending, or selling I should say, is going rather well for Brexit.
It's a bit like those APR rates, isn't it? You hear on the television.
Yeah.
1,000%.
Yeah, 1,794%. Yes, absolutely. But there we are. It's an interesting one. Is that the answer to our Brexit woes, I suppose?
Yeah.
Selling arms to
to other
dubious
countries.
nations around the world. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, why not? What could possibly go wrong, Pip?
Yeah, nothing ever has gone wrong by doing that.
No, indeed. Sound advice for everyone there. Right, who? I think it's Al next with the next story, please.
Oh, I thought I was going to be exempt. Hang on, is this the... okay, this comes from Popular Mechanics. So I believe we're thanking Micah for contributing this one.
Absolutely.
So as China's world influence expands, so is its military. An increasingly capable navy, large investments in weapons tech, and its first overseas military base speak to President Xi Jinping's goal to make China a global superpower. But to match that ambition, the People's Liberation Army has turned to other countries for inspiration when it comes to outfitting its armed forces. Although buying or stealing foreign military technology could be seen as a strategic weakness, China skips expensive and time-consuming R&D. Has someone fallen over?
I think Pip's
Everything has
fallen
just
off his
fallen
chair.
over.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll mute myself while I recover.
Happy days, everyone.
Are you okay? Are you injured?
Yes. Are you all right, Pip? Everyone is concerned.
I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Save yourselves.
Okay, fair enough.
Do you know, I knew that was going to bloody well happen when I set this all up. I precariously balanced my laptop on the end of a shelf here, a bookshelf. Anyway, do carry on. I'll be back.
Right, okay.
One word, IKEA.
Right.
Second word, desk.
Right, indeed.
So,
sound advice.
Yes, expensive and time-consuming R&D, and nowhere is fast and loose weapons adoption and its inherent shortcomings more apparent than in China's Air Force. Like the US, China deploys aircraft with a broad range of capabilities, but unlike most of the US, most of China's planes are based on plans purchased or stolen from its adversaries. Here are 7 of them. This is a little bit pictorial, so are you ready, Matt?
No, but yes, I will be. You carry
So
on.
we've got the Chengdu J-10 and the US F-16. Yes, there's some similarities there. In the 1980s, the US partnered with Israel to develop a new combat aircraft based on the General Dynamics F-16, but its cost rose. The US pulled out of the deal, leaving Israel's Lavi fighter unfinished. Years later, American officials discovered that Israel sold the Lavi development plans to China, granting them unprecedented access to technologies first developed for the F-16. The J-10 shared more than a striking visual resemblance with the F-16. The technology sourced through Israel allowed China to advance significantly over the 1960s era fighters they were fielding at the time. This would not be the last Chinese fighter to incorporate elements of the F-16. I'll get these teeth to work properly at some point. But it's the most direct. An updated version of the J-10 entered into service last year with an advanced fire control radar array, an increased use of composite materials to reduce weight, and a number of domestically developed updates that aim to keep the J-10 capable for decades to come. Then we have the next one. Are you ready, Matt?
I am, yes.
Okay. This is the Xinjiang J11/16 and the Russian Sukhoi S-27. Well, one's grey and the other one's blue, so quite clearly they're not at all the same.
Right.
As the Soviet Union neared collapse in 1989, China seized the opportunity to secure the production line for the Sukhoi S-27, an air superiority fighter developed to counter American jets like the T-14 Tomcat. The Soviets, keen to sell China a new MiG design instead, were left with little choice in the face of looming economic ruin. China quickly set about producing their own Su-27s and then improving upon the design to develop what would become the J-11. Unlike other fighters China employed at the time, the Su-27 brought advanced avionics systems and fly-by-wire technology that China was also able to incorporate into later platforms. In 2000, Russia sold China a number of advancements they'd made to their own Su-27 platform, and China's subsequent effort to incorporate them alongside domestically developed technologies has since resulted in the J-16, a modified and updated Su-27. Moving on, we've now got the Shenyang J-15 and the Russian Sukhoi Su-33. How many more of these? Oh, there's some boxer shorts there. Great. Okay. Okay. So
we'll do one more of these after
what
this.
The crux of this is that the Chinese are very good at copying things.
Yes,
and this actually is no great surprise to most people in the commercial world, because the Chinese are experts at copying and improving.
Mm-hmm.
And, it comes as no great surprise that they're doing this with military technology, because after all, you can go and buy in China a Range Rover copy, you can buy a Rolex copy, so why on earth can't you buy, an F-35 copy? They can do it. It's just a skill that the Chinese have developed in copying things. And, some might say that, copying is the best form of flattery.
Well, the scariest thing about all this is quite often, though, as you were saying, quite often the copies end up being better than the originals.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember many years ago going to a street market in Thailand and buying a Rolex copy, and quite clearly it was a copy. And there was no pretending that it was anything other than a copy. And I'm not going to suggest for 1 minute.
No.
That it was worth much more than the $5 I paid for it. But it kept bloody good time, which watches go is one of the primary design specifications.
Yeah, no, I'll give you that. Yeah, absolutely. It's it was just scuffed and scratched within 15 seconds, but it
actually lasted about 3 or 4 years. That thing did, and I'm sure that the gold plating was probably the cause for the massive rash that developed on my arm. But that's.
Where did you buy it from again?
Thailand.
Right, okay. Of course.
It's the only rash I came back with before you asked.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, it cleared up before he left. Yeah.
Yes, it did. Absolutely. Less questions when he got home. Good. Pip, have you stabilised your equipment? Are you all set for the final story?
I don't quite know how
Probably
to answer
best
that.
not asking about Pip's equipment.
Well,
it's as stable as it's ever going to be, Matt.
Right, fair enough. I'm sorry I asked.
Yes. Right, the next story, I believe, is courtesy of Armando, and this is from the cap.news, which seems very appropriate since this is the millinery segment.
Yeah, the what? The millinery? Right.
I was expecting a bigger reaction to that gag.
Right, okay, sorry.
I've been laughing at that for the last few minutes while I was reading this story. I thought that was hilarious.
Right, good.
Cap.news, the millinery segment. Oh, forget it.
I can hear Tumbleweed.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm going to check the chat room. I'm sure someone...
it's because... Hang on. Is this because you come from Luton?
What?
Isn't Luton famous for hats, or is that somewhere else?
Okay, we seem to have stepped into a slightly weird area, gentlemen. Let's kick on.
Right, let's start all that again.
Yeah, nothing.
From the cap.
Nothing from the chat room, I'm afraid.
I'm trying to think. Isn't that why Luton Town Football Club are known as the Hatters?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, it's very good. Yeah. Lee saying yes next to me.
See, not just a pretty face. I'm, educated as well.
Well done. Well, you do fly an Airbus. What can I say?
They do say if you have to explain it, then it's not funny. But in this case, I think it genuinely was funny, and it's just you're all too thick to understand.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. Barbara is
Coming
laughing.
from the person who doesn't have a desk for his laptop.
Right, yes, okay. Well, Richard King has found it amusing, so you're not completely on your own. Barbara Parrish has found it funny. Dr. Steph has just gone, eh?
No, well, I wouldn't expect Steph to get it.
Show title, Pip's erection difficulties.
Moving on. Abort. Right, okay.
Right, come on, let's get on with this. I've got
Let's be
places to be.
That was funny.
Yes, indeed.
It's Plain Talking UK. It's not Radio 4.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Fair enough.
It was quite a high class gag. I'll give you that.
Yes. Yes, it was. It was wasted on us, really, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah,
but
all right. So this is right. Shut it. Cap.news, which has nothing to do with hats,
Crap.news.
baseball caps, top hats, or millinery of any sort. This is in fact the Civil Air Patrol.
right. Okay.
Which is part
Very
of the
serious.
U.S. Air Force Auxiliary. And as I say, this comes courtesy of Armando in the chat room.
Yeah.
And the headline is
He's
specially
an awfully
equipped.
fine fellow.
He is a jolly fine fellow indeed. Specially
So say all of
equipped.
us.
Shut up, will you? Specially equipped cap planes conducting Florence
Maybe in the
damage
next version
assessment
of Google
flights.
Hangouts, they'll have the option to be able to mute other people.
Good. Right. Yes. You never know.
Anyway, get on with it, Pip.
Yes, come on. Stop that, silly. Right, Civil Air Patrol is in full launch mode this week in the Carolinas, with air crews in both states conducting aerial imagery flights with specially equipped planes in support of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. CAP, acting as the U.S. Air Force Auxiliary, is supporting Air Force's northern during defense support of civil authorities' operations following the landfall of Hurricane Florence on the East Coast. There we go. I told you this was topical. AFNORTH's, which is as I said, the Air Force Northern, AFNORTH's primary role is to support U.S. Northern Command's efforts to provide assistance to FEMA's relief efforts. There's a couple of pictures here, Matt. You want to stick them up?
Oh, sorry. Right.
As
Yes.
part of that mission, CAP has launched a surrogate Predator plane, or surrogate remote piloted aircraft, that can record video for review upon landing. The plane is flying sorties in South Carolina, complementing the more traditional Garmin Verb or Nikon handheld camera imagery collecting sorties that are also being flown. During this mission, our primary purpose is to support FEMA and its mission tasking, said Lieutenant Colonel for you Americans, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Wood, Deputy Commander of CAP's Green Flag East Flight, which is based in Alexandria, Louisiana. And there's some nice pictures taken from this drone, looking at, I guess it's some burst riverbanks, and I've just lost the story. It's just come up with a stupid advert. Okay.
You wouldn't have this problem if you had a desk.
Will you? Oh, is Josh still there? Josh, give him another slap.
It might be bedtime for Josh, I suspect.
Yeah.
But
Okay, well, look, this is a long story, but there's some pretty pictures there with some equipment being strapped to looks like a Cessna 172, and there you go. They're using aeroplanes and special equipment to go off and monitor the goings on of Storm Florence, or Hurricane Florence, I should say.
yeah, absolutely.
So that all looks rather fun. So the Civil Air Patrol, as I understand it, we don't really have an equivalent here at all, in fact. So this is a group of pilots, volunteers who are using their own aircraft, civil aircraft like this Cessna here and others, to provide support functions for the U.S. military. And this is a very apt using their stuff to aid in
So just
disaster relief and that kind of thing.
yeah, just helping to get sort of collect data, I suppose, as well in
Yeah,
regard to the.
Now, I used to do, back in my old life as a survey pilot, we used to have a standing contract where we'd be on call. I think it was like a 2-hour call out or something for the Environment Agency, because obviously we get a lot of flooding over here. So in the rainy seasons, we'd often go off and go out and start taking pictures and all sorts of stuff of flooded areas. And that was quite fascinating work, actually. You could, over the course of the day, see these regions starting off from being non-flooded to the water coming in and then totally covered in water. Quite what they did with the images we took, I don't know, but it all went back to the Environment Agency, and they were able to do whatever they do with it.
I imagine they would be able to look at the imagery that you took and to see what flood defences they could build to prevent sort of the collateral damage.
Yeah, that's it. I don't think it was much of sort of immediate relief. It was more for future planning and seeing how and where places flood and what they could do about it in the future. But it was fascinating work when I did it. Let's see.
Yeah, I bet it's well, and as you say, the data is so useful, isn't it? At the end of the day, this is how it sort of, hopefully they can use it to maybe sort of plan where floods might appear, perhaps, how the route might change, or the impact and the area of certain water levels and things. But it's good, very important work.
Yeah. So, Armando, thanks for the story. I'm sorry Al ruined it for us all.
Now.
I take my hat off to you, sir.
Indeed. Good. Right. Nev, that concludes the military section. I can't believe we got to the end of it.
I think we're grateful for that,
yeah, absolutely. And we've got one more piece to play out, and also some feedback, which I'm looking forward to playing. So
yes. So we're going back to Farnborough again from earlier this year in the outside now, I'm pleased to say, because it was nice and sunny there. The weather was very good whilst we were there.
Yeah.
And we did some interviews in front of that A380 high-fly aircraft, which was great. And Carlos bumped into Captain Jeff, and here is the interview.
So we have got ultimate podcast royalty with us here in the face of Captain Jeff. Welcome, Jeff. How are you?
I'm very fine, thank you. How are you?
Oh, good. Did you get a good night's sleep?
I did. Yeah, got about 7 hours or so. That's pretty good.
Oh. Because you're staying at
an airport near here.
There is an airport near here, yeah. But you're staying at Casa del Nick.
I am, yes. The Anderson household is a wonderful place, yes.
What's the star rating?
I'd say it's a solid 5 out of 5, yeah.
Excellent, there we go. You heard it here first. So, Jeff, you've obviously you were here at Farnborough 2 years ago, back again this year.
Actually, I was back last year, and there's really not a lot of people or airplanes or anything really going on.
But you were here in the UK with us in January.
Yeah, I was.
For the 200th.
For the 200th PT UK celebration. Yeah. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I've seen you twice this year already. This is fantastic.
Wow.
Honestly, I'm lucky. Very lucky.
Well, I'm lucky.
So, Jeff, you've been enjoying the beers here in the UK.
I have not had one drink since I've been here. I've had probably dozens, maybe even over 100. So,
that's good. That's good.
It's been quite a toll on my liver, I think.
So you've been here now in the UK for what? Just over a week? Is it a week now? You've been in the UK?
I came in on Wednesday morning of the previous week, so it's been more than a week. Yeah, a week.
Wow.
A week and a few days. Week and a half total, I think.
So this must be quite sort of interesting for you, the fact that we actually have sun here, or summer.
Yeah, I was expecting it to rain the entire time, and I haven't seen a drop. Yeah, it's been very nice and dry, warm. Yeah, nice and green. Well,
ish.
Yeah. There's some green over there. That's
so, Jeff, we are standing right sort of in front here of the A380. Have you had a chance to look on board yet?
No, I haven't.
No.
Are they open for tours?
Between 2 and 4. Okay. I'm guessing you're going to be heading that way for a preview.
I guess I will be, yes, now that you've said that.
I did notice along the flight line earlier, there are no mad dogs here.
What?
No.
Are you kidding me? I guess they've stopped trying to sell them. Yeah. A long time ago, they tried to stop selling those things, yeah. The Mad Dog is what I fly, the 88 and the 90, and it's an airliner. Kind of from the DC-9 heritage. It's actually a DC-9. -88 and a DC-9-90, and it's an airplane.
Pip's just going. It's pipped off.
I think so.
He's had enough.
It's actually at our carrier and several other carriers. It's Acme, yes.
Yeah.
It has the reputation to. Well, it doesn't have a great reputation. Let's be honest. And I never expected to fly it. But I've been on it now for about 16 years, a little over 16 years. It's really not that bad of an airplane. It's a nice jet. It has a great heritage. It's, the fly-by-wire airplanes we have out here. Well, this is not fly-by-wire. It's fly-by-cable. Yeah, literally, the cables and the pulleys and everything else go to the actual control surfaces themselves, physically. and you get a really nice feel, and it's just got an interesting. The way it flies is unlike any other jet that I've flown before, and it's great.
Do you think you'd be interested in having a go at flying the 380? Is that something you'd like to?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind, but Acme needs to buy some of those for me to fly that. So we don't. My airline doesn't fly the 380.
No U.S. airline actually I think flies the 380.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't mind going up and having a pattern, a couple circuits around the pattern. That would be kind of fun, I think.
Excellent. Is there any particular aircraft you're looking forward to seeing in the sky today, Jeff? Obviously, we've got the 350-1000 just over there.
Yeah, I saw that show, the demonstration on Thursday. I was here on Thursday, and saw the 350-1000, very impressive. The Dreamliner, another impressive demonstration.
Al would beg to differ, but
yeah. Well, we have some disagreements or disagreements on specific brands and stuff. But to me, they're all airplanes, and it doesn't matter. They all fly pretty much the same, and they're all fun to fly, I think.
Excellent. So Jeff, you're off back to Atlanta, I guess, Sunday or Monday? Tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Business class, obviously.
Well, I'll see. We'll see. Yeah, I'm hoping so. Yeah, I didn't have it on the way out. I was in the very back. It wasn't too bad of an experience. Came over on a 330-200.
Oh.
And it was pretty comfortable. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, as always, Jeff, it's been a pleasure to see you and meet up with you again. It's always good to have you over here in Blighty,
yeah,
as
Nick
would say. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your weekend here.
I plan on.
And don't forget, me and Matt, we do live in the back end of nowhere, but it'd be great to see you.
I'd love to make a trip over there sometime. Not this time, but maybe next time I'm here. I'll make the trek.
Well, thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Well, thank you.
And take care.
All right. If you don't mind, I'd like to kiss the
Wow. That did prove to be very popular, your muff, Nev. I'm
yes,
not
it
going to lie.
had a lot of attention, more than I'm used to, I have to say. But,
absolutely. Yeah, it's almost worth the investment. Hey, it's. I don't.
Well, you know what they say: when you've got a good muff, it will draw a crowd.
Quite right, indeed. Sound advice for everyone in general there. Okay, we've got a piece of feedback that I'm going to play out now for you. And he says, trying to frantically find it. He's lost it. And so, yeah, we don't get a great deal of feedback, but I'm delighted to say that a new listener, a chap by the name of Tom Harris, has reached out to us. And here is his feedback.
Hello all at PT UK House and your esteemed collection of listeners. I'm a new listener, new to PT UK, and I have to confess I branched out slightly from Airline Pilot Guy. I started listening to that show in around February, and after a couple of episodes was referred or found myself referred over to PT UK as well. So it's a slightly new world to me, but one I'm enjoying very much. I'm just responding to your request for audio feedback. I noticed in the last couple of episodes that I've been listening to that you were asking specifically for audio feedback. And so I thought to myself, well, that's something I can do to help the show, because I do really appreciate everything you do with the show. It's something that I really look forward to listening to every week. I find myself driving around for my job at least one day a week, and it's just something that rather than listening to the same radio show and the same music over and over again, it's something that I'm really interested in, and it's nice to hear like-minded individuals talk about something that you have an interest in. I'm not sure how you do it, because I have to confess it's taken me long enough to send in this small clip of audio feedback. So how on earth you guys managed to pull together a show, find a time when you can all get together, and I assume you all have jobs as well. So yeah, it's really appreciated though, the work that you do. It's top notch, and I have to say they talk about IPA a lot in the AVG, and I have to say that this whole world of aviation podcast is not dissimilar to my relationship with beer. You start drinking beer, and to start with, it's an interesting interesting taste and you're not convinced, but for some reason you persevere. There's something about it, and before long you are hooked, let's say, and that really is a compliment. It's something that I really do enjoy, and I do also really enjoy beer. So what I thought I'd do, I don't have any specific. I find it interesting they call it feedback. I don't have anything specific to feedback. So I thought I would give myself, or I'd introduce myself slightly, as I'm a new listener and I haven't really engaged with the community. I tend to listen on the audio podcast, so I don't get to join in with the live chat that you seem to have going on, which is something that I'll aim to do in the future. But yeah, I thought I'd just introduce myself and tell a bit about my sort of interest in aviation, and hopefully it will just strike true with a few of your listeners. I'm sure many of your listeners are in the same situation as myself. So yeah, my name is Tom, and I'm from Southend, home to PTUK's favourite airport, I'm sure. And like many young children, I was always interested in anything that moved, anything mechanical, machinery, all that kind of thing. Just infatuated by it, and I kind of knew from a very young age that's something I wanted to do. I wanted to be an operator. I wanted to work with machines. I wanted to do something along those lines. And within that umbrella of interest was also aeroplanes, and living near Southend Airport, it's not the hub of UK travel. It wasn't the hub of UK travel that it is now, and so I used to get excited every time something bigger than a Cessna passed overhead. But yeah, certainly aviation was included in that interest. Although I didn't at the time consider for 1 minute that a career in aviation was a possibility for me, for various reasons, with my upbringing, my personal situation. I just didn't think it was a possibility, and didn't even give it a thought. It might as well dream of being an astronaut or a rock star or something like that. But it was always there. The interest was always there. I used to go along to air shows and everything else. And I can remember my first flight in a helicopter at Southend Air Show. They did a joyride, and I was absolutely just in awe of it all, really. But then later on, so I moved on to a career, and I started actually working in agriculture. I chose tractors over planes. But then in my early 20s, something happened. Well, a couple of things happened. I took my first commercial flight, and on that flight, I think it was the first officer actually gave his PA from the front of the aeroplane, and you could tell he was just completely passionate about what he was doing, and that really struck with me. And suddenly I was there sort of face to face with someone who was doing something that I was interested in. And then shortly after that, I got my first taster flying lesson, so half an hour in a PA-28, I believe it was. And from that point on, the dots kind of joined up, and suddenly this thing that I was interested in suddenly could become something that okay, you can work and make that into a career. So it kind of moved from sort of impossible and not even worth considering to okay, this is something that could potentially happen. And it's fair to say that I have been bitten by the aviation bug well and truly since that date. And I think it's a very old quote, but it's described very well by Da Vinci. I think it's, for once you have tasted flight, you will walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, for there you have been, and there you will always want to return. And I think that will strike true with many people listening to this show. And actually, I sort of got a sense of it in Pilot Pip's recent segment on celestial navigation in episode 233. I think it is that sort of common interest in the skies above that seems to manifest itself in all aviators. And I quite often find myself staring up at the night sky while everyone keeps their heads down. So anyway, moving on from that, now in my late 20s, and I have yet to start any formal training, although it's something I set my sights on. I think we all know that the cost of aviation training is somewhat prohibitive. And so I guess this is a sort of a bit of advice, or yeah, I'm not sure I'm qualified to give advice, but what I found is with all goals in life, you'll find barriers that will stop you from, or that will seem to prevent you from achieving them. And what you have to do to get around that is you have to do the things that you can do. Focus on what you can do to get closer to your goal, and not what you can't do. Don't focus on the big wall. Focus on the little baby steps that will take you around the big wall, if you like. And so what I do is I read up what I can, and I try and increase my knowledge of aviation. I try and network as much as possible, go along to careers days, try and talk to people in aviation whenever I get the opportunity. And occasionally, maybe once a year, I might get to fly. I might get a flying lesson for a birthday. I might scrape together enough cash to take a lesson, and that just keeps the passion going, and it keeps it ticking over. But one of the fantastic things that contributes to that whole what you can do is actually listening to shows like PT UK, and that's been really fantastic. It's something I can listen to while I'm actually driving around doing my job, and it does just keep you in touch with things within the aviation industry, and it gives you a bit of a heads up as to what might be happening and what opportunities might be coming up, and it also just keeps the passion going. It's really great, and I can't express my gratitude enough for that. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to do those things and just enjoying the here and now. Focus on what you have got and what you can do. I've got a pretty decent job. I've got a great family, and life is generally pretty good. And I'm sure that soon enough I will work myself into a position where I am able to take the next step, and that next step along the road of hopefully finding some paid work in aviation. So that's it from me, and just a bit of my background. I just wanted to, as I say, just provide a bit of support for the show in giving a bit of audio feedback and expressing my gratitude. Sorry it was a bit lengthy, but you did ask for it, so I'm not too sorry. Other than that, I have shared a link in the email that I sent this audio clip with. For those in a similar situation as me, something I heard on the BBC News about I think it was the grandson of a Spitfire ace, has managed to set up a flying display completely operated or flown by flying display team. This is flown by all disabled people with disabilities in some way or another, and the link takes you to a short clip, video clip on sort of a bit of an interview with each of those, and it just goes to show that there aren't many genuine barriers to what you want to do in life. If these guys can overcome that and form an aerial display team, then the world really is your oyster. So yeah, I've included that in there, and yeah, it's just pretty inspiring, really. I think they did their first display on the 5th September. I haven't found any footage of that yet, but yeah, I'll have another look, and I'm sure you can find something online as well. But other than that, I will leave. Now, and hope to catch up again soon. And I will continue enjoying listening to the show. Many thanks, Tom.
Wow, thank you, Tom. That was a fantastic bit of it. I'll tell you what, we're having a real run of luck in regard to inspirational young people. I think it's great to hear from you, Tom. Thank you very much for taking the time to write. Even you got a mention, Pip. How about that?
What a top chap, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, seriously, thank you for doing that, Tom. Much appreciated. Great pleasure playing it out for you. And if you've been inspired to tell us a little bit about your interest in aviation, there you are. You see, great subject matter for people to talk about. Send your feedback to podcast@planetalkinguk.com. That's podcast@planetalkinguk.com. Once again, Tom Harris, thanks very much for taking the time to send that to us. Nev, I think we better start wrapping up. I've just realised how massively overrunning we are.
Yes, I could see you twitching there at the 2-hour mark, let alone now.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's been a good show, hasn't it?
Very hectic. We packed a lot in this week, and it was great. Just to let you know that next week's show won't be on Friday, but it'll be on Sunday morning. And we've got a couple of special guests who are Paul and Alex from the Layovers podcast. And if you haven't heard that podcast, it's definitely worth a download and listen. There's lots of Nev's passenger experience type stuff going on there as well. So we're looking forward to chatting with them next week, and that will be on.
I listened to my first of their podcasts a couple of weeks back, and I think I texted you actually, Nev, or I texted one of you guys and said, "Hey, check this out." This
you said how much better it was than my one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there was a bit of Skype. Is it the Legover podcast?
yeah. It might well be. Yes, indeed.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll look that one up then.
Yes, I should. Yes, it's right up your street. Yeah. Yes.
I'm surprised you haven't bookmarked it already.
Yeah, indeed. Well, look, gents, thank you so very much for joining us. Pip, where are you off to next week? Anywhere nice?
The States. So I've got a flying out to Chicago on Wednesday, and then another flight to Columbus, Ohio, and I'm there for 8 or 9 days in total. I'm going to be visiting at the end of it, going back and staying a few days in Chicago.
Okay.
And seeing the sights and having fun.
Fantastic.
So looking forward to that.
City.
Well, it is when you're there.
Yeah. Well, indeed. Al, where are you this week? Anywhere nice?
Well, I'm going the opposite direction. I'm heading east, so I fly as a passenger tomorrow to Katowice. I'm out there for then 6 days of flying, and then I'm back for a few days.
Fantastic.
Yes. Oh, I should just a little plug then. Since I am out there, I'm going to certainly be meeting up with the Columbus locals, Jen and James, and hopefully Rick Bell as well. I'm going to have a round of golf with Rick, hopefully. But if anyone else happens to be in that area, then drop us a line and we'll
Are you taking golf bats with you?
Do you know what? We actually have a couple of sets of Safe Jets golf bats over there for us to use. Yeah, we've got quite a few keen golfers, and they've they chipped in and got some golf
sets,
things to have. So I'm an expert, as you can tell.
They're going to be really pleased when you brand them all, then, aren't they?
Yes, indeed.
Well, that is true. Nev, are you anywhere exciting this week?
Bits and pieces, but the reason that we can't do the show on Friday, it's the AV Awards at the Grosvenor House Hotel in London. And
I'm banned from that establishment.
Well, I'm not surprised. We're only allowed back once a year, but obviously I'm going up for the AV Unprofessional of the Year.
Excellent.
Win that.
Cool. Lovely. Yes. Obviously, presumably, we've been nominated for Podcast of the Year. That obviously goes without saying.
We don't do podcasts. But
don't you? Well, they should. Go, have a word with them. Absolutely. Indeed.
But they need to join the 21st century.
Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, the hotel is certainly not the 21st century, as you may know if you've been there.
Right. Oh dear, never mind. Yeah. I'm not doing anything particularly exciting. I think I've got a couple of local trips. I think I've got a trip to Southwold this week. That's going to be a bit long distance for me. But
Is that where the flower show is?
No.
Oh, okay.
The flower
What's
show.
in Southwold then?
Rich London people usually.
Okay. So you're taking a load of tourists to go and see some rich London people in their country homes?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's
Yeah,
sort of, it's sort of like one of those.
It's much better than that. It's actually
Stars of Hollywood tours. So you get them all in the coach.
Yes.
And you go, look, there's a rich one there.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's another one there.
To be fair, it's primary school children that I am taking there, and it probably will be very much like that. In fact, we don't get rich people much around here, so we do sort of point at them. With their fancy mink coats and things. So, yes, anyway, on that bombshell, we probably should start to wrap up. Thank you, gents, for
So do you get many people coming into Bungie and saying, I say, dear chap, can you tell me where I can plug my car into the charger, please?
No, but I do have an amusing story about a milk float that I once had to plug into a thing that was doing, what was it? I think it went from Lowestoft to Land's End. And it was a milk float, and it came to the King's Head, which is where I was working once, and we had to literally plug in.
Was it driven by a chap called Ernie?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the fastest milk float in the West. It was a BBC 4 journalist and 3 nut jobs, basically, who decided that they were going to ride this. I actually appear in a book, believe it or not, and it's called 3 Men and a Milk Float, and I actually appear in it as somebody who helped them out. So, anyway, that's my claim to fame. That's got nothing to do with aviation. We better say goodbye, Nev.
So is that what we can put on your headstone when you eventually leave this mortal life?
Yeah.
He charged a float.
He did. He charged the milk float. Yes, absolutely. Gents,
I shall remember that in 40 or 50 years' time when, we're sat in a pub.
Right.
Go, what a dashed fine fellow that man chap was.
He charged up a milk float. Yes, he did. And on that bombshell, ladies and gentlemen, in the words of the infamous Jeremy Clarkson, it is
Just
time
before
to...
we go, was it a 2-wheel or a 4-wheel drive float?
4-wheel.
Okay. So it was good on the ice then, yeah?
Yes,
For those winter
absolutely.
mornings?
Yeah, absolutely. Quite. Nev, help.
Did they let you have a go at it?
No, I wasn't allowed to drive it. We had to sort of virtually rewire one of the function rooms in order to be able to plug it in. But anyway, there we are.
I know you've got various classes of vehicle on your licence. Do you have milk float?
Matt, you're going to have to mute him, otherwise he won't stop.
Ladies and gents, it is 10 o'clock, so that means it is time to end. It's way past my bedtime. Nev, thanks as always. We'll see you next Sunday, mate.
Pleasure. Take care. Have a nice weekend, folks.
From all of us here in the studio and that, everybody say goodbye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbyes.